Greetings and salutations one and all. Welcome to the night shift. How you doing? I want to say big ups to each and everyone locked in right now. Those on TuneIn Radio, the night shift with DJ Kevin Steele. Those hailing from across the pond, One Harmony Radio. Top of the morning to you. Those locked in on ClintonLindsay.com, the Foundation Radio Network. Big ups. Blessings and hello to those on island worldwide. How you doing? Big ups to those on PEMGTV.com. Welcome to those on WGLRO, home of the Donnie Walker Morning Show, taking you from the sheets to the streets, the People Station, touching from Detroit to Denmark and all points in between. And of course, those of you locked in right here on KevinStew.com, the home of the night shift, where we are encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment. So glad to have you. I couldn't do it without you. And guess what? You have my word. I would not even try.
Speak the truth. Hey, no one forever. I look and know the truth. Don't need no debate, no way. Why you hype up yourself? How you know say I lie you are tell the truth. No call for no argument, no way. So why you are defend yourself when I know say I lie you are tell? Tell a lie till you confuse it.
Kicking off tonight with a little Jadan.
Yeah, you don't got no health. Put your heart where you can't reach it. You ready? I see people things. Tell me why you want. If it have a ulterior motive and it's no secret. Me come here so fi speak it to everyone. Me come fi reveal it. No more. Me now hold no secret. Tell us the truth. Don't need no defense. No way. Why you want defend yourself when you know say a lie you are tell? The truth, no call for no argument, no way. So why you want hype up yourself when you know say a lie you are tell? Me did tell you, so
Hey, Soli.
done. I go bring a
How you doing?
reaction. Why you want to play the victim when you know how you do me wrong? You know it hurt me, 'cause you coulda killed me. Have you as a brother so close to me? You shoulda never be. Tell me why you want to change me energy? Why you want to see the enemy?
Want to say greetings to those locked in on Facebook Live.
You have life, you
Remember, this is only temporary.
on me. Tell us the truth.
Use the link in the description and go to the website kevinstew.com for the entire broadcast.
Defend yourself.
But while you're here, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies,
The truth
share it to the friends of your enemies and the enemies of your friends.
in the way. So why you hype up yourself?
It's a night shift to DJ Kevin Stew. It's Community and Finance Night.
You say I lie you want tell. A song for you want sell. Oh,
Kicking it up with a little Jadan. It's called The Truth.
you say
Well, actually, it's just called Truth.
you say I lie you want tell. Me did tell you, so every action I go bring up a reaction. Why you want to play the victim when you know how you do me wrong? You know it hurt me, 'cause you coulda killed me. Have you as a brother so close to me? You shoulda never be. Tell me why
Want to say a quick thanks to my segment sponsors.
you want to see the enemy
First off, Pulse Media Group,
of life. You are gonna
providing innovative streaming and recording solutions when being in the moment is priceless. Go ahead and give them a call, 754-999-6020, or check them out on pulseemg.com. They can do everything you see right here on kevinstew.com and so much more. If you want to take this internet streaming thing a step further than just doing a broadcast on your own website,
when you know say I lie.
or just doing a live broadcast whether you have a seminar or anything for a one-time event. If you want to have your own internet broadcasting TV station, go ahead and talk to them over there at Pulse Media Group.
Hype up yourself.
want to say thank you to Althea and her healing heavenly hands. Althea is a licensed massage therapist with a little bit over 20 years of experience.
When you know what you do me wrong.
She comes to you COVID free with her table and her healing heavenly hands.
Have you as a brother so close to me, you should never be.
Operating out of Broad County, North Miami-Dade and South Palm Beach counties. Give her a call, 954-655-9000. That's 954-655-9000. You can email her at thealater@att.net. That's thealater@att.net. I want to say thank you to Reggae Global Entertainment. They provide booking services, booking agent services, tour management services. Tour management services, business registrations, legal service referrals, music production, marketing and promotion, and so much more. Give them a call, 954-998-8034, or check them out online on reggaeglobalentertainment.com. Thank you also to GMAT Music Solutions. They cover your event, bringing it to life, providing sound, light and stage production services, musical equipment, PA systems, audio engineers, DJs, bands, musicians, singers. Give them a call, 754-307-GMAC. That's 754-307-4622. Or link them online, gmatmusicsolutions.com.
Why you want to see the enemy? As long as you have life, you are gonna live to see the best of me. Tell us the truth, don't need no defense, no way. How you want to defend yourself when you don't say a lie, you want to tell the truth, no God, no argument, no way. So why you want to hype up yourself when you don't say a lie, you want to tell? You don't say a lie, you want to tell. As some fire you want to sell. Oh, oh, oh. The fire it a burn red, red. You don't say a lie, you want to tell. As some fire you want to sell. The truth don't need no.
Just trying here to connect with my guest for the night.
Why you want to defend yourself when you don't say a lie, you want to tell the truth? The God, no argument, no way. So why you want to defend yourself when you don't say a lie, you want to tell?
Sometimes making these connections, you make them earlier, and something happens, and you just can never be too sure. So trying to reconnect with Scott. Call your friends, tell your friends as we go ahead and try to make this reconnection. This is Paul Paulin. It's called Monster. A song written about those wrongfully incarcerated. Just having a little difficulty here connecting with Scott. Okay, so I was trying to connect with Scott and not getting through. Don't know what's happening. A little bit of difficulty here. But in the meantime, in between time, never fear. We have a bunch of information to give to you. The last time Scott could not have made it because his mother-in-law passed away that night. And but tonight, excuse me. Tonight I have a little bit of help. The last time I took care of it myself with some information that I had gotten along the way. Tonight I have information that I've gotten along the way again, but I have a little bit more help. You've heard him here before, starting back in I'd say November of 2019, the first time I spoke with him. This is a gentleman that I've met through the connection with Donnie Walker and the WGLRO. It was Donnie that introduced me to him. And he's really no stranger to the night shift. He's pretty much a family member. I can just introduce him and go lay down for the next 90 minutes or so. And he'll take care of the rest. But we're not doing that tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you none other than our very own. Some of you who caught the 2020 special on Rodney Reed on ABC last week and last Friday, the 12th. Is it the 12th? No, the 11th of December. Then you would have heard his voice, you'd have seen his face. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. David Fisher.
With such a build-up, I'm not even sure that I know this guy myself.
No, it's still you I'm talking about, Dave. It's you. Contrary to popular belief.
To all your listeners, let me apologize for that disaster that was the ABC 2-hour special. At least to me, it was a disaster.
I saw that
after spending a year in documents, and I'm talking sometimes 8-9 hours a day,
right,
and then 4 to 5 10-hour, 12-hour days on camera. For that, and I know that's what they were going to do. I just told them, thank you, but no thank you. But I believe what happened is when the state moved Rodney Reed's hearing from February 2021 to May, they just did a filler, just to fill up because they'd already booked the time.
Right.
And they're going to take all of the documentation that was put together over the last year and air it probably sometime in April to early May before the hearing.
That's your thought.
Yes, that's my thought. And I'm telling you, if that's their game plan, they have made a critical mistake. Because Rodney's sitting in jail, solitary confinement, 1 hour a day in the exercise yard, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
And yesterday was his birthday.
No,
was
tomorrow is his birthday.
Oh, it's tomorrow?
The 22nd.
Oh.
Of December.
Oh, they had a rally for his birthday yesterday.
Right, they had a rally, yes. Because it was on the weekend, his birthday would be on a Tuesday.
Right.
And getting close to Christmas, the closer you get to Christmas, the less people you can get at a rally.
Right.
As people start. So yeah, tomorrow is Rodney's birthday. And for them to do this with utter disregard for, the truth and justice and innocence, simply to try to get a bigger nickel for their dollar, I'm sorry. that I'll never deal with that, with ABC ever again. I'm telling you, I won't. And I told the producers, they lied to me up one way and down the other. But tonight we're here to talk about Ed Salmela.
Yeah.
And Ed Salmela's death. For y'all that don't know, Ed Salmela was one of the two Bastrop detectives when Stacey went missing. And Ed Salmela was the detective who processed what was originally the crime scene where the pickup was found in the high school parking lot.
Okay.
Now, for people who don't know the story, and even for people who do know the story, you really don't know the story. Because I'm going to tell you the truth about this. When I was asked to look at this case by the Smithville Times newspaper in 2001, they provided me their files, the files from the Austin American Statesman, the family files, the defense attorney's files, and I went through them. And I'm going to tell you right now, what happened that first day implicates only one person, and that is Jimmy Fennell.
From the very first day?
From the very first day. And what you see is who's involved in covering up for Jimmy Fennell. Because they leave a paper trail you can drive a truck over. Now, just going by the paperwork first, Ed Salmela was assigned to process the pickup. Now, Bastrop is small, very few police officers. So the sheriff deputy loaned some of their people to help Ed process the high school parking lot. Now, since this is in the city of Bastrop, the Bastrop sheriff deputies can collect no evidence. They have no authority.
You said a Bastrop sheriff.
Right. They're sheriffs, and this is in the city under the jurisdiction of the police department.
Okay.
So Ed assigns, there were 3 deputies. He assigns them, their duties. The 2 critical deputies are Robert Foster, who Ed gives the camera to take the pictures. Ed will direct Robert Foster, Sheriff Deputy Foster, to take specific pictures of specific items. Then arrives Sergeant Chris Walker, also of the Bastrop Sheriff's Department. Ed requests that he canvass the parking lot looking for any evidence. One of the things they're looking for are the car keys. The vehicle's locked,
right?
And there's a possibility that the car keys were just thrown somewhere by the person who left the truck. So Chris Walker's canvassing the parking lot. What Ed finds is a HEB pen, a napkin, a broken part of a belt with the buckle, and what Chris Walker finds is 2 bags of clothes, clear plastic bag with clothes in the dumpster. That's all. That's all that Ed takes into evidence. Now,
and
I talked. Joe, I'm sorry.
And I know I have a document here. It's kind of turned sideways, but I think I can show it. That is evidence found at the high school.
Yes, this is from Ed Salmela's report.
Okay, let me go ahead and
what items
put that on the screen.
He found,
so that people can see it.
Yes, and this is the official report. This is all of it. Now, I talked to Sergeant Chris Walker after the trial in 2001 when I came in, 2 years after the trial, almost 3. And he was disturbed because the prosecutor was trying to force him to take the stand and say stuff that wasn't true. That's our illustrious Lisa Tanner.
Right.
And he wouldn't do it. He didn't know what she wanted him to say. It was just that it was not truthful, and he refused to do it. She threatened him, and he told her, "Go ahead. You think you can do it? Throw it at me." And he used a nice big B word. So she didn't put him on the stand. Now, I kind of had to chuckle to myself because I had the records when I talked to him. And so I told him what she was wanting him to do. And he was appalled. He had no idea they had done this. Now, we'll talk about this a little later on. I'm getting the cart in front of the horse.
Okay.
But I needed to do this, to preface this, because of what I'm going to say next. When Chris Walker, canvassing the parking lot, looked in the dumpster and saw those two clear trash bags full of clothes.
Yeah.
I asked him, why is that a big deal? And he goes, "Oh, Dave, anytime you find bags of clothes, backpacks of clothes, hidden around a school, you have to take it seriously because it's an indication that a student's going to run away from home after class. Or somebody's going to pick them up and they're going to disappear. So you find bags of clothes that are clearly clothes that somebody wouldn't throw away, you've got to start an investigation. And these were clothes that a person would not throw away. Now, what Chris Walker didn't know is that at 5:30 a.m., a Bastrop police officer on patrol went through that high school parking lot, saw the pickup, went over, checked it out, and in his report, he noted that behind the passenger seat was one clear trash bag of clothes. So at 5:30 a.m., one of those two bags of clothes was still in the vehicle, which means the person who was staging that crime scene was still there. Yes, sir. Now, you say, well, why haven't we heard about this? Yeah, well, you're going to find out a lot of stuff you haven't heard about. And this is what I keep warning people. In Texas, you cannot read a trial transcript or hearings and be certain you know anything about the case. Because more often than not, the truth never gets into the transcript of the trial. And that is absolutely the case here.
And not only does the truth not get into the transcripts of the trials, but apparently they don't get on news media specials either. And so someone chiming in the stew pot here saying, welcome Justice C. They played the 911 tape of Connie Lear reporting Jimmy Fennell raping her after she told them not to play it. They didn't mention the beer cans, didn't even mention the Connie York case Rodney was acquitted of, and they interviewed his lawyer from that case, and they didn't show Joy Montfort either. Joy, who has been on this broadcast also. Gary Joe Brand's death is not much discussed in Ed Salmela's death. Did David look into Joe Brand's murder too? I guess that's a question for you. And I heard Officer Alexander, who reported the bags of clothes at the scene, is now deceased. So this is someone who has been staying on top of the Reed Stites case.
Right. You see, the Stacey Stites Rodney Reed saga is as simple as you want to make it or as complicated as you want to make it. Now, what I told the producers and emailed them after I saw this 2-hour debacle, I told them, I said, the story they put together was indicative of a story you would have done in 1999, the year after the trial.
Right.
Because that's basically all they had in it, was that the evidence at trial. And the people, there was nothing new. There was no bombshell. The only thing that was new, and here we go now, when I was on your last program, anybody who heard that know I am not a fan of the Innocence Project.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely not a fan of Barry Scheck. And
he doesn't really like you much either.
Well, yeah, that's obvious. Yeah, more than people know. This is not a love-love relationship.
Right.
But the reason that I feel that way is how they have treated Mr. Reed. You see, I went to the Texas Defender Service and asked them to join Reed's case in 2001. When they agreed to take it in 2002, Rodney's former Innocent Project attorney, Bryce Benjett, was at the Defender Service. He called me, set up a meeting, told me that the Defender Service was taking Rodney's case, but it would be handled out of Houston, and Rodney's attorney would be Morris Moon. But they had assigned Bryce Benjett to be my liaison, since he's in Austin and I live 30 miles outside of Austin. It's easier for me to go to Austin, present the case. He, as the attorney, would type up the reports with the documents and send them to Houston to the attorney that represented Rodney. Well, I cooperated in that for 13 years. I provided him everything that I have put out all the way through this thing.
Yes.
The time of death. All of this was given to Bryce Benjett starting in 2002. None of it made it to Houston. None of it's in the file with the Innocent Project. They have no clue what took place for 13 years. And to see Barry Scheck on that 2020 case say, it's all about time of death. It's all about time of death. And retired New York detective Kevin Gannon brought the time of death issue to Bryce Benjett in 2015. Nobody had known this until then. My butt. This is the report I gave to the newspaper in August 2001, that Stacey had been dead almost 24 hours when they found her body. And I wrote a letter to the editor they published where I laid out the key points of the case, that the state had 2 sets of crime scene pictures, one the original, one digitally altered.
Right.
That the medical examiner only guessed as to how Stacey died. He couldn't tell if she'd been strangled or suffocated, whether the ligature marks were post-mortem.
Right.
And the time of death. You see, and people who have played the State versus Reed documentary,
yes.
And if you haven't played that,
Take
you
a
just
look.
go online in your Google, type in State versus Reed documentary, you'll pull it up, play the hour documentary. I'm in there. Now, the documentary was done in 2006. The interview from me was done in October 2001. The 2 documentary makers used the interview I gave them as part of their college graduate film thesis on the Reed case.
Okay.
And they put it in there. I had no idea they were doing that, and didn't even know for almost more than a year after they had done it before I knew that it was out there. But neither here nor there.
Right.
But what I told the newspaper is that based on and it's in the documentary, based on the fluids in the floorboard of the pickup,
right,
the purge fluids that you see on Stacey's face and mouth at the crime scene later that day, that those purge fluids like that do not occur in 2 hours of death, within 2 hours of death. They're hours after death. 5, 6, 7 hours before they start. The volume of fluids on the floorboard of the truck, the transmission hump, various other places, tell you she's been dead a very long time. And since the truck was found in the high school parking lot at 5:30 a.m., Stacey would have arrived in Bastrop at the latest at 3:30 a.m. And Reed, as the state had said, had abducted Stacey from the pickup where she'd stopped at a street light or however, then he could have only had 2 hours in which to abduct her, drive her to the country, rape, murder her, drop the body, drive back into Bastrop, leave the truck at the high school parking lot, and walk home.
Well, not only that, and this is a debate that I had with someone over the weekend. Whose fingerprints were found in the truck?
Well, yeah. there were only Stacey and Jimmy's.
And now the argument
No.
is he could have wiped his fingerprints off.
Yes, that's what the state said, that Rodney used Stacey's T-shirt to wipe away all of his fingerprints.
Okay.
But you see, and so I thought about that. I thought, well, of course, they used a black light. And see, that would only show a black man's fingerprint, right? You know, I mean, we're stupid here in Texas, right? You know, if you're going to look for a black man's fingerprint, you use a black light. I mean,
Right.
Where does this attorney general come up with this crap about somebody being able to figure out to wipe only their fingerprints off a vehicle using some super X-ray vision or a black light to see their fingerprints? It's dumb.
Right,
The
because
problem
all the fingerprints would have to be wiped, and there's no DNA for Rodney in the vehicle either.
Right. There's no evidence of Rodney ever being in the vehicle.
Okay.
Period. None.
So for those who are just tuning in, let me do this really quickly. Those of you on Facebook Live, please use the link and go to kevinstew.com, because this is where we say sayonara to Facebook Live. It's been real having you. Thank you for your support. Call your friends, tell all of them. Just go to kevinstew.com, where we continue this discussion with David Fisher. We're talking really about Ed Salmela's death, but if you're wondering what does Stacey Stites and Rodney Reed have to do with this, stick around. The dots will connect. All right, Dave.
Okay. So you know, working this back to Ed Salmela's death.
Yes.
What we have is the evidence is conclusive that Stacey died in Giddings. That's the only way she could have been transported dead here. And so when Ed's processing the high school parking lot, he finds 4 pieces of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. The belt, a napkin, an HEB pen, and 2 bags of clothes from the dumpster. That the detective who found them says these are clothes that a person would not throw away. So they're taken into evidence. They're taken to the police department. Ed gives the 4 items that he collected to the police chief, who goes into his office where Jimmy Fennell is, and the police chief confronts Jimmy about this evidence. You know what's interesting about that?
What?
There's no detailed report on that. The most critical, you know, conversation of the whole damn case, and the police chief doesn't write a comprehensive report.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who's in there with him? The other detective, David Board, who will show up again and again and again and again and again in this case, and most prominently in Ed's death. So Ed turns over all the evidence to the police chief, and then Ed keeps the photographs that he took. About an hour later, the police chief asks Ed to take Jimmy Fennell to the impound lot and use Jimmy's keys to open up the pickup and have Jimmy tell him what's missing. So they do that. Ed does that. Jimmy points out a broken plastic cup. Now, the first thing your fiance is missing, and you're opening the pickup, and you're to tell him what's out of place, and he says, "Oh, there's a broken plastic cup. That wasn't broken before." Yet, on the other side of the floorboard of the pickup, and the passenger's floorboard, is her shoe, her earring, and bodily fluids.
Right.
So you got a plastic cup, and then shortly after that, he says, "Oh, check in the center console and see if my checkbook's there." So Ed uses his pen to carefully open the console without disturbing any fingerprints, and there's no checkbook. Now, Jimmy's, again, more concerned about a broken glass and his checkbook.
Mm-hmm.
And the checkbook's missing, doesn't say a word more about it. A week later, he has a meeting with the sheriff deputy and says, "Oh, I had my truck picked up and sold this day, the 29th of April."
Okay,
This is 6 days.
Before you go on, David, hold on. I'm sorry. You mentioned some of these things that you just mentioned. I'm just going to put stuff on the screen here, where Ed handwrites these things that you mentioned, because this is his handwritten section of his statement.
On the bodily fluids and the things they see in the floorboard.
Right, and he puts a time and what he found, and here it is.
The high points.
Yeah. So you said 10 a.m. took Jimmy Fennell, friend, and Curtis Davis.
Curtis Davis, the Jimmy Fennell's best friend. And ex-sheriff jailer. Jimmy and Curtis used to be sheriff jailers at the Bastrop jails. Curtis still was at that time. And both of them live in Giddings.
Okay.
But they work in Bastrop. Well, but Curtis Davis lives there. So Curtis Davis is with Jimmy all day that day.
Right.
So Ed takes, Jimmy and Curtis Davis over where they open the truck.
Right.
And what you have here is Ed writing his notes, the time they went over there, the high points of what was discovered in the truck and what Jimmy and what Fennell said.
Right.
About what was in the truck.
Right.
So you had all of those little pieces there. Now, what's interesting about this, because you got to back up and back up a little bit, because see, all the evidence never came out. You see, it wasn't till 2016 that Curtis Davis ever showed up and spun a different story than what Fennell did as to what happened that night. Fennell said that he was home all night with Stacey. They took a shower together, they got out, got partially dressed, lay down on the bed, he gave her a back rub, she fell asleep, he went in and watched TV, and then he went to bed. But in 2016, Curtis Davis did a CNN interview. And Curtis says that Jimmy told him that he wasn't home that night until, almost 11, that he was out drinking with his buddies. Which means Jimmy committed perjury on the stand.
Right.
Now, Curtis went on and said that the next morning, the morning that Stacey went missing, Curtis came to work that morning over at the jail, because he's a jailer, and he was surprised to walk into the jail, the sheriff deputy break room, and there was Jimmy Fennell. He's going like, oh, what's Jimmy doing here? He works in Giddings. Why, he doesn't work here. I mean, goofy stuff.
Right.
And then, Jimmy told him, oh, Stacey's missing. And then they got the call to go to the police station over, the Bastrop police station. Well, here's a little tidbit of what, and this is Rodney's attorneys. They still haven't figured this out. So, hey, Bryce, if y'all are listening, here's a little bomb for you. Curtis Davis was scheduled to work the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. that week. This is 12-hour days. That Tuesday night that Stacey went missing, Curtis Davis was to work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Wednesday morning. So, but Curtis Davis claimed he had a broken tooth, and so about 2 hours into the shift, he took off. Well, that Wednesday, he was to work, again, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. He was not scheduled to work a day shift that week. So he lied again.
Maybe, so he went in to make up time, maybe?
No, because he's, if you're scheduled to work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and you come in at 7 a.m. and you're supposed to go to work back at 7 p.m., well, you're going to work a 24-hour shift? No, it doesn't work that way. What it was is all a lie. See, here's the deal. In that 2020 piece, I got to digress a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, Bryce, are you listening over there at the Innocence Project? The Attorney General who prosecuted Reed on the 2020 piece goes, "We just couldn't figure out how Jimmy could have driven Stacey's body in the pickup, left it in Bastrop, and walked back to Giddings 30 miles away to be back at his apartment at 7 a.m. when the phone call came in. We checked the taxis, we checked the bus services. Yeah, well, did you check his best friend, Curtis Davis? Because, oh, wait a minute, Curtis Davis took off work at between 8 and 9 of his supposedly 12-hour shift and went back to Giddings." Well, here's the deal, people. When you go do your Google search on State versus Reed documentary, also do a Google search on Rodney Reed, and in parentheses, Framed, and you'll find another documentary. In Framed, you'll have a woman by the name of Yolanda Felix, who lived with her 11-year-old son about 2 blocks behind the high school parking lot. On that Tuesday night, about, around 10 p.m., her dogs start barking, so she goes out on her front porch. And what does she see at the end of her drive? She sees Jimmy Fennell, the Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow, the Bastrop detective David Board, and the backdrop detective Ed Salmela. And Fennell has his truck. Well, guess what? Stacey's dead body is in that truck. Fennell left the truck with Ranger Wardlow and David Board to stage the crime scene, and Curtis took off work and drove him back to Giddings. That's why Curtis knew that Jimmy wasn't at home. He was out drinking with his buddies because he picked him up where he was drinking with his buddies between 10 and 11 and drove him back to Giddings, so he knows what time he got home because he's the one that drove him. Now, when they have the hearing with Curtis Davis in 2017 on the stand, did Bryce Benjett ask him, "Did you take off work that night? Don't you live in Giddings just down the street from Fennell? Isn't it true that you drove him home? That's why you know all this stuff." He didn't tell you. You drove him home. You picked him up. You knew where he was drinking. No. Bryce Benjett has never done one thing to raise any evidence that would lead to Rodney's innocence, even though he had this. And I had talked to him about this. It made no difference. That's the Innocence Project that Barry Scheck has let get away from him. And if it stays this way, Rodney would get executed again. Only that ain't happening. If I have to drive a truck over the Innocence Project and their reputation is destroyed, it's on you, Bryce. It's on you, Barry. You're being warned. You can pull these records. I'm telling you where the records are. Now, when Barry Scheck in that 2020 piece says, "Oh, this retired New York detective Kevin Gannon came and disclosed this discovery of time of death," no. I gave that file to A&E TV's producers. Kevin Gannon was one of the 3 detectives, on that program. I provided the documents. The producer, when they came to my office, I asked them, "What are y'all doing this story for? Do you think are you trying to prove that he's guilty, he's innocent, or you just don't care? It's a good story." "Oh, no, Dave, we want to prove he's innocent." And I said, "That's what I wanted to hear." I gave them a file that I'd already put together, told them, "Take this to any national renowned medical examiner to your choosing, and they're going to tell you she died in Giddings, and her dead body was transported."
So,
a couple weeks later, I get a call from the producer. He goes, "Oh my God, Dave, we presented it, and the medical examiner said exactly what you said. We got the transcript." And I said, "Because they're in New York. Innocence Project is in New York. Kevin Gannon's in New York, but the other 2 detectives are in Florida." I told the producer, "Give that file to Kevin Gannon and tell him to shove it up Bryce Benjett's butt, only less delicately."
Yes.
And that's what he did. But Kevin Gannon was working with my file at my direction. And then I have Kevin Gannon running around telling everybody, "Oh, she drowned. Oh, the burns are from the hot water spigot. We went into her apartment and see the spigot's on the left side of the tub." and she was face up for at least 5 or 6 hours after death. None of that is true. Stacey has never been face up.
Except
Stacey
at the
was
stage
not
scene.
drowned.
Except at the stage scene.
Yes, except at the stage scene. But long after her rigor and lividity had set. Now, I know what happened, the whole length of time of where Stacey was, what the burns are, all of it. Now, 2020 has that.
Okay.
There's a new medical examiner that came into this, and I provided them the documents. And they're sitting on that. Had they done this, well, Vereshek would have another, oh my God. And they would be able to start putting together their case for next May. But no.
Okay.
2020 wants to make another nickel, and so the Innocence Project wouldn't have this until a week before Rodney's next hearing, and they wouldn't be able to do anything with it.
All right. So
I'm going to put it all out there.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you guys pay attention over there at the Innocence Project. Maybe you'll win one. Oh, God.
So let's not overload people too much with some of the other stuff.
Yeah, right. So let's move it on with Ed. So Ed canvasses. He takes takes Fennell over to the truck. Mm-hmm. All Fennell will say is this checkbook's missing.
Right.
And then that ends that until Texas Ranger Wardlow, around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, tells the police chief that they need to send Ed to escort the wrecker service to load Fennell's pickup up and drive it to the DPS crime lab in Austin.
Right.
So Ed does that. Ed arrives, about 3 p.m. Well, as soon as he arrives with the wrecker, there's a DPS officer standing out front waving him down, telling him he's got an emergency phone call. And that the police chief says not to process Ed's truck in. Jimmy's truck in. So Ed goes in, takes a call, and is told, load up the crime lab and bring it back to Bastrop. We found her body. So, best on the documentation timeline, the truck's left outside the fence. It's not taken into the impound lot. Mm. And they load up the crime lab and they drive back and process the crime scene. And since it's out in the country, that ends it for Ed. Now it's a sheriff, not a Bastrop Police Department. It's a sheriff case. And Ed is pushed the wayside.
Okay, so his involvement is only to the point where the vehicle was discovered and they started an investigation at the school.
Right. The only crime scene was the pickup because they didn't know where she was.
Right.
So Ed processed the first crime scene, or what was thought to be the crime scene, collected the evidence, and then escorted the vehicle to the DPS impound lot, and then escorted the crime lab, the DPS crime lab, from Austin back to where their body was found that you'll see, in the State versus Reed documentary.
Right.
And then his involvement pretty much ended.
Okay.
But the other detective, David Borge, didn't. He's flying in the helicopter with Rocky Wardlow, which is like, okay, wait a minute. You're flying outside the city. You don't have any jurisdiction outside the city. And it's the police department that asked you in, not the sheriff's department. See, Texas Rangers do not get to go where they want to go. They have to be asked in by the local law enforcement. They have no authority to stick their nose in unless they've been asked in. So they've been asked in by the police chief. So their jurisdiction is, they get the helicopter, they fly around town.
Right.
They don't have the authority to go out and look in the in the countryside.
And that's the other part of it too. There are 3 law enforcement agencies at play at this point.
Well, actually 2. Well, yeah, 3. You got the Bastrop. Well, at this point, you only have 2. You have the Bastrop Police Department and the Texas Ranger. When her body's found outside of town in the country,
right,
more than 7 miles out of town, then it becomes a sheriff department investigation, and then they bring in the ranger. They have to ask the ranger in, and so then becomes a sheriff ranger. But wherever Rocky Wardlow goes, his little sidekick, David Board, goes. All through this case. You have David Board acting as if he's a division of the Texas Rangers.
Mm. Because and why I ask that, or is because when it gets to the point of at Ed Salmela's house,
David Board.
Yeah.
David Board is everywhere in this. You saw him on the 2020 piece.
Yes.
David Board had all the DNA of all of the extraneous rapes that they accused Rodney of all the way back to 89. Of the 12-year-old girl that you heard Joey Montfort say, that wasn't Rodney Reed.
Right.
And,
Joy came on this
David
broadcast. Joy came on this broadcast because she was best friends with Angela.
With the 12-year-old girl that was raped, right.
Right. And she even says, they wouldn't allow her to testify. But she also names...
They wouldn't let her testify at court, and they wouldn't let, and 2020 wouldn't put her on air.
Yeah.
Even though 2020 has that entire rape report from the 12-year-old.
Yes. And
Angela
they interviewed Joy.
Right. Well, I have the copies of all this. And Angela Hamby names another guy who's serving life in prison right now. Mm-hmm. He was 19, 6'2", 200 and something pounds, star football player.
Yes.
African American, just like Rodney.
Yes.
But he had scholarships from universities all over the country because he was such a star football player. They believed he was going to be a first-round draft pick for the NFL.
And put Bastrop on the map.
You got it. And so does it matter that he raped and bit and I mean violently a 12-year-old white girl? Nope. see, you keep hearing this county say, oh, it was so taboo for a black man to be dating a white woman. No. That was not the problem.
Right.
Rodney Reed dated white women who had family members in law enforcement or who were also dating law enforcement. That's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Is dating white women who were also dating or engaged to police officers. And it wasn't just Stacey and Jimmy. There were others. And that was the problem. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of I know a lot of white women in Bastrop who were dating, black men at the same time all of this was going on and before. And they're still married and they have kids that are older than Rodney has been in jail. And they lived in Bastrop and they never had a problem.
Right.
So there is a difference. I mean, there is a subtle difference. This is not the racist, cotton belt that 2020 put out there. I tried to tell them that, but they wouldn't listen. But anyway, so once Ed's off the case, so he's off the case by June 1st, he's out of it. Mm-hmm. And then you have July 1st. And then August 1st, and on August 3rd, Ed's dead.
Okay, so yeah, how does that tie into this whole thing, though?
Well,
let's connect that.
Initially, it doesn't look like it is, but then you do a little digging and you go, what the hell is this? See, Ed allegedly committed suicide using his .45 caliber chrome. It's his chrome .45 caliber pistol with pearl handles. Really sharp, nice-looking gun. But then you do a little digging, and you find that a couple of weeks before, Ed a warrant was taken out for Ed's arrest for domestic violence and terroristic threats with his girlfriend. Whether that's true or not, there's a lot of suggestion it's not true.
Okay.
But But a charge was made, an allegation was made, warrants were issued, and Ed was indicted. Now, under the federal 1996 Anti-Terrorism Act that went into effect the first part of April 96, now this is August, July and August, if you're accused of domestic violence or making terroristic threats, you immediately have to turn in your guns.
Right.
And so I found a woman, have her statement or affidavit, stating that she was at the jail on August 2nd. And she was waiting to bail out one of her aunt's boyfriends who got arrested. While she's sitting there waiting, she hears David Board talking to Mike Norman, another officer, saying, "Here he comes, here he comes." And so the woman looks, and she sees Ed coming in. Ed says hello to her. She says hello to Ed. He walks up. She watches him deliver his guns, his badge, his nightstick, everything, to David Board and Michael Norman, and turn and walk out. He was required to do this under federal law, which he did.
I have that handwritten affidavit right now up on the screen.
You have the handwritten statement.
I have it up on the screen right now.
Okay. Now, here's the deal. If Ed surrendered his gun, his .45 caliber gun, to David Board, how does he commit suicide with it the next day? Yeah. And of course, guess who's Johnny first on the spot of the suicide? David Board. And of course, then they have Ranger Wardlow do the investigation to declare Ed's death a suicide.
What's wrong with that?
Oh, I'm sorry?
And so what is wrong with that?
Well, it just so happens that Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow's wife had thrown him out of the house and was divorcing him, and he didn't have a pot to piss in. So guess whose couch he was sleeping on? Ed Salmela's couch in that apartment. Rocky Wardlow was living in Ed's apartment, sleeping on the couch to within 2 weeks of Ed's death. Rocky Wardlow had just moved out. Rocky Wardlow didn't tell his supervisors at the Rangers, at the DPS, that he was Ed's roommate in that apartment and he had a key, which makes him a suspect in Ed's death.
Right.
And so Rocky Wardlow, who is a suspect in Ed's death, does the investigation and declares it a suicide. Then he claims, and then he testifies at trial, that they took gunpowder hand wipes. Now, you want to see crazy. You got to see the transcript. You've got this Lisa Tanner again, the one you see there, saying, "We don't know how Jimmy got back." She's asking Wardlow, "Have you ever taken gunpowder hand wipes?" "Oh, yes, I have. I've been trained in it." And it says, "So is there a time frame that you're told that you have to take the wipes?" "Oh, yeah. You have to take them within 3 to 4 hours, or you might get a negative, something like a false negative." What? No. 60 years ago, they would test for nitrites from the gunpowder. Now, but nitrites, you could be working with fertilizer and you'd have nitrates. There's a lot of ways to have nitrites on your hand. Working in a, shoveling out a horse stall with all the nitrites from the urine in the dun will do that.
Right.
But they don't do that anymore. They used metal alloys that are vaporized when the powder discharges. And so like antimony on the hands. Now, if you were in one of the pyramids that was built 12,000 years ago and fired a gun and were sealed up in that pyramid, and they found you 2,000 years later or 10,000 years or 12,000 years later, they could do gunpowder tests on your hands, on your mummified hands, and that'd still get a positive if you fired a gun. So this crap about you have to take it in 3 to 4 hours,
that just needs to be tossed out.
It's not true. It's a lie. And then he says, "Oh yeah, they took them and the results were negative. It has to do with the gun and this and that and the other." When I saw that testimony, I thought, BS. So I filed records request with the DPS, with the Attorney General's office, with the Travis County Medical Examiner's office, with the Bastrop Police Department, with the Sheriff's Department. Everybody that was involved, nobody has them. Because they didn't do them.
And I've seen those documents. I have those too.
Yes, you have those too. Because Ed didn't kill himself, he didn't shoot himself, he didn't have his gun, they killed him. Ed was getting ready, that night was leaving the state for Louisiana, and he was trying to set up a meeting with law enforcement. He was going to turn state's evidence on this bunch.
Okay.
And they killed him.
Stick up in
my opinion, based on the documents.
I spoke with Scott, who would have been here tonight, except for, I don't know. That's the bottom line.
Something came up.
Yeah. Now, here it is. When I spoke with Scott, he was telling me the story, and he mentioned, because he did the cleanup of the apartment, he mentioned that they removed the couch that he was on, stating that it was too gruesome for him to look at. But he's in there cleaning up all the blood. He speaks to Ed's neighbor, based on what he's telling me, and the neighbor said they spoke prior. They said their goodbyes. He heard the gunshot. He came over. The door was locked. He went and called the cops. He came back. The door was unlocked. And cops inside. One of the cops being the former roommate.
I talked to a lady who was a bail bondsman, who was Ed's best friend. And she heard the police scanners of the shooting at his apartment. She jumped in her Cadillac, and it's like, 3 minutes from her office to Ed's apartment. And she's there, and by the time she arrives and walks up to his door, guess who's standing in the doorway? Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow. Rocky Wardlow. Now, the neighbor said that, the door's open, also said it was Rocky was there, and the door wasn't kicked in, but it was locked when he checked it.
Right.
So it tells you somebody had a key, and that somebody was in his apartment waiting for him.
Either they were in there,
or they were yes, sir. They were in there waiting for him. Now, you listen to Rocky Wardlow's trial testimony, you read it,
yes.
And here's his story that he told under oath, that he was in Austin visiting his sister when he was made aware. David Board called him and told him about Ed's suicide. It's already calling it a suicide. Didn't say Ed's death. The report says Ed's suicide. And this is in Wardlow's Ranger report of Ed's death. So Wardlow is in his civilian car, according to his testimony at trial, and drives to Ed's apartment. Now, for you people that don't live in Bastrop County, and that's just about everybody, it's 30 miles minimum from where Rocky was to Ed's apartment. So it's a 30-minute drive.
Right.
And yet, within 5 minutes of Ed's death, the people were there say Rocky Wardlow standing in the doorway. So again, he lied under oath. This is your famous Texas Rangers. And let me tell you, if you think this is an anomaly, you don't know the Rangers.
Or Texas.
This is standard fare for them. There's a lot of DAs and sheriffs who have nicknames for Texas Rangers. They call them dogs. They say the only thing they're good at is burying things and chasing cars.
So,
and I'm going to tell you, my experience is exactly that.
I've looked
at lots of reports.
I'm looking at this report. Texas Department of Public Safety, Texas Ranger Division. Report of investigation, date August 13, 1996. This is up on the screen right now. Questionable death, 0007. Bastrop County, Ed Salmela, August 3, 96. And
now remember, this guy lived in that apartment as Ed's roommate on that couch where Ed's dead body is found to within 2 weeks of Ed's death. He had just moved out.
Right.
And of course, they were having problems because word is Ed had enough of this cover-up for Jimmy Fennell and was going to talk. And he was leaving the state to meet law enforcement outside of the state.
Because
and they couldn't let him go.
no, you said something. You mentioned what's her name that lives behind Felix.
Yes, Yolanda Felix.
Yolanda Felix. And I reached out to her too, by the way. Didn't get a response.
Right.
And
She's not going to talk to anybody now because at the time this took place, she had an 11-year-old son,
mm-hmm.
and she walked out on her porch and saw Ranger Wardlow and the others and Fennell out in front of her house.
And you said
that
Ed also.
Huh?
And you mentioned Ed also.
Ed was there too.
Okay.
And you know, the very next day, Stacey is, you know, her truck's found just down the street from her house behind the high school parking lot. Now, what's interesting is her son is on a Little League team.
Right.
You know who his coach was?
Who?
Rocky Wardlow. And when he went to Little League practice the next time, Wardlow threw him off the team. Didn't no explanation whatsoever. Just told him he couldn't play on the team anymore. Which makes a lot of sense because that old saying, out of the mouth of babes.
Yeah.
All Rocky Wardlow had to be doing is standing around to about 5 or 6 parents and have this little 11-year-old walk up and say, Coach Wardlow, what were you doing out in front of my house with that cop whose girlfriend was killed that night?
Right.
Well, that'd put a wrinkle in his, in his career, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So he threw him off the team. Now, shortly after this, Miss Felix and her son, they moved to Georgia. They never made the connection. Well, now her 11-year-old son is an adult male. He lives in Bastrop County. He's got 3 sons, young sons. And she's not saying anything that would put them in jeopardy, and I don't blame her.
Right. Got you.
So that's why she's not talking.
Okay, got you.
Without the subpoena, she's not talking.
So going back to this information here, the synopsis, the Texas Ranger file here. Synopsis.
You can read that report, and I defy you. Read that report and see if you can figure out a damn thing that went on. See, Ranger reports are notorious for not saying anything. I mean, nothing.
It's just a bunch of words. So it's just a bunch of words.
It's just little words that don't say anything factual. They say, oh, I interviewed so-and-so, and they said they weren't involved. Now, that person might have said, oh, but I know the person, I know this was going on, and this was, and that was, and they hid the gun, and, oh, yeah, all that could be in there, but it's not going to be in the report. It could be in their statements, not in the report. And then the Rangers will testify at trial, oh, yeah, we destroy all of our notes once we write the report. But the reports don't have anything that were in the notes.
I'm asking you about...
This is the most convoluted, craziest, law enforcement agency that ever existed. And if people think the Texas Rangers are the end-all of investigators in this state, I'm going to tell you right now.
Stop watching TV.
They are the worst, the least trained, the most corrupted. The only thing they do when they're called into a case is figure out how to cover up for law enforcement or the state. That's why they call them dogs, saying the only thing they want to do is burying things. I've had DAs tell me, yeah, we had this in-custody death, and so we called in the Rangers. And the Ranger came to office and said, oh, we can make it go away if we do this, and the other. And the sheriff and the DA say, well, we're trying to figure out what the hell happened. We're not trying to, cover something up. We want to know what happened. Oh,
right.
No, we can make it go away. Just incredible crap. And so more and more, DAs and sheriffs do not allow the Rangers to come into their county and do investigations.
So
that's how bad it is in the state.
Looking at this report, because that also helps to frame the big picture.
Yes.
With this section of the picture, looking at Ed, where in the details it says, oh, here they go. Justice C saying, didn't Rangers help cover up Sandra Bland's death too? Don't get David started on Sandra Bland.
Don't go there. Now you'll see more of that.
That's another show, though.
I'm working this with another big nation network, and let me tell you, It's worse than Reed's case.
Yeah,
that's
that's a whole broadcast by itself.
Don't
get him started there.
It's a whole lifetime of broadcast.
But
anyway,
looking
let's get back to Ed's.
This first line, details 1. Let me put that back up on the screen for those watching. On 8/3/96, approximately 9:13 p.m., the writer was contacted by Bastrop Police Investigator David Board, who advised he was on the scene of a suicide at the Arbor apartment complex in Bastrop.
Right. And Rocky Wardlow is supposed to be in Austin, 30 miles away, and yet the people who come to the scene say he's standing in the doorway.
Got you. So
within 5 minutes of Ed's death. So Rocky Wardlow is there with David Board, and guess who's the last person to have Ed's gun? It was David Board.
Right, according to the affidavit that I had put up earlier.
And according to what federal law required Ed to do. That's why that person's statement rang a bell. When the person told me this, and I took their statement, I'm going, okay, wait a minute. There's something funny. 96. What? There's a federal law about this, and so I had to go look it up. It's a federal anti-terrorism act that requires you to surrender your guns if you're charged with domestic violence and making terroristic threats, and he's charged with both of them. So her statement, she doesn't know any of this, and so her statement fits exactly what federal law required.
Right.
And Ed was indicted just a few days before his death by a grand jury. So, yes, he had to surrender his guns, and he did. And then they used those guns to kill him. And declared a suicide. Now, talk about a completely controlled scenario. That's what you had.
Here we go again. When I spoke to Scott said, based on what they were telling him, he committed suicide using his offhand with the gun.
Right.
And we know that.
His left hand.
Right. So he's right-handed. They said he shot himself using his left hand. Scott told me Ed did nothing with his left hand. It shook too much.
Yeah, he didn't have control over it. Now, also, the autopsy report says that the gun is held so firmly to his head that you can see the muzzle imprint pressed into the skin and the pinpoint at the base of the barrel.
Yes.
So that the gun is cocked more of an upside down than the trigger handle being down. It's twisted up. But there's been so much pressure placed to his head that it leaves the imprint of the gun muzzle into his skin. Who puts their gun to their, you're going to commit suicide and you shove it so hard that you leave an imprint? Are you kidding me?
Well, if he was distraught, maybe he would.
But you don't even go there because the Texas Ranger who did the investigation,
yes,
was a suspect. It was a self-serving investigation, so you can't believe any of it. Now, let's get back before we run out of time to what happened to all of Ed's evidence collecting once he's dead.
Yeah, that's important too.
Yes. Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow goes and rewrites all the evidence sheet.
Come again?
He changes the name. Now, you have a copy of that spreadsheet from Texas Ranger Wardlow. Wardlow changes the evidence. Now, Ed collected and documented a HEB pen, a napkin, a half part or broken part of the belt with a buckle on it, and 2 bags of clothes from the dumpster. Now, these are all things Ed collected as the Bastrop County, the Bastrop City police detective. In Rocky Wardlow's spreadsheet for the DPS, evidence sheet, he changes the name of who found all this evidence. He removes Ed Salmela's name and adds Sergeant Chris Walker's name. Now, Chris Walker is a sergeant with the Bastrop Sheriff's Department. He could not collect any evidence. But Wardlow puts on his spreadsheet that Sergeant Chris Walker is a Bastrop police officer.
Right.
And he says that Chris Walker, Bastrop police officer, found the pen. Bastrop Police Officer Sergeant Chris Walker found the napkin. Chris Walker, Bastrop Police Officer, found the broken belt. Bastrop Police Officer Chris Walker found the bags of clothes.
But
those are the 4 items. But now there's a
we
fifth
have
one.
it here. Investigator Ed Salmela evidence: one blue or dark color belt that was broken, buckle, blah blah blah. One HEB writing pen, white paper napkin, 2 clear plastic bags, assorted clothes, color film. One items 1 through 4 were released to Chief Ronnie Duncan. That's Ed's report.
And they were and those clothes were never seen again. But here's the deal: after Ed's death, Ranger Wardlow adds a 5th item that was allegedly found. Check carbons from Jimmy Fennell's checkbook.
That is on that little spreadsheet.
But Ed didn't find any check carbons.
Right, he didn't mention that.
Yes, because he didn't find them, because they weren't there. But remember when Ed used Jimmy's keys to open the car door and Jimmy said, check in the console and see if my checkbook's there?
Right.
And it's missing? Jimmy didn't say anything. Well, those check carbons you found on the ground must have been torn out of my checkbook. No, because there were no check carbons found. But you see, here's what happened. Later it's determined, or it's later disclosed, that when Jimmy got the call at 7 a.m. that Stacey wasn't at work, his report is he drove from Giddings to Bastrop into the HEB parking lot, didn't stop and talk to anybody,
to look for
did a U-turn and drove back to Giddings. That's a 30-minute each-way trip. So he gets back to Giddings about 8 a.m., a little after 8.
Right.
And what's the first thing he does? He goes to his bank and closes out his bank account, because Stacey and Jimmy are not married and they're using a joint account. If her body is found, the bank's going to seal the account pending probate. And Jimmy knows this, so he's getting his money out because he knows she's dead at 8 a.m. Now, when I looked at this case for the newspaper back in 2001, here's what I saw that told me he killed her. On the 29th of April, 96, he meets with the sheriff detective. He tells them on this day, meaning the 29th of April, he had his truck picked up from the impound lot at the DPS where they were allegedly processing it, and had it sold. And he says, oh, and by the way, in my stolen checkbook was a check that was signed with no amount filled in. It was made out to the tax assessor collector. And Stacey, when she got off that work that day in Bastrop, she was to go by the tax office and pay the registration on the truck, which was past due. When I saw that, it told me he killed her. Because, see, Jimmy and Stacey live in Giddings, which is in Lee County.
Right.
In Texas, you cannot register your vehicle but in the county you live. She couldn't register the truck in Bastrop. Now, in that in that 2020 special,
yes,
December 10th, there was one thing that made it worthwhile to me. The family released a picture of Jimmy standing, the little pudgy boy Jimmy standing next to his pickup, his red pickup, and it's in the early spring, and that is such a high quality picture. I can see the registration sticker on the pickup, and it says 37. This is a couple of weeks before Stacey's death, which means the registration was
already
current.
done.
That's right. So all this stuff about the checks being pulled and everything, this is all to give him cover from having closed his bank account at 8 in the morning when he's supposed to be looking for her because he knows she's already dead. See, that's the stuff. And you see, hey, I'm sorry. I'm a consultant in this case. I'm always looking for new evidence.
Right.
And if I see it, I'll recognize it. And boy, I can tell you, I screenshotted that shot fast and put it into the documents because that's a critical piece of evidence. Now, the check carbons that were torn out of his checkbook, they fingerprinted them. There are fingerprints on those check carbons. Would you like to guess whose they are?
Jimmy's?
They're Jimmy's. And you can see where he's pulling them out of the checkbook.
Based on the smudges.
Yes, more evidence of him. Now, when the Attorney General, this Lisa Tanner, who can't figure out how Jimmy got back to Giddings or anything else other than what she can manufacture, they have the DPS fingerprint person take the stand, and they ask the fingerprint person to do chain of custody on the check carbons. And the fingerprint person's DPS says, oh, yeah, they were found in the pickup. They were found by John Barton. So they introduce them into evidence. The next question that the DA asked, the fingerprint person says, oh, wait a minute. Did you ask where those check carbons were found? I don't know where they were found. I think Barton found them. I don't know where they were found. I don't know who they found them. She just broke chain of custody. Rodney's attorneys, if they were legitimate, would have jumped out of their seats going, objection, Your Honor. They just procured a fraud on the state and on us. They gave chain of custody and then they broke it the next question. You know why they did that? If you commit perjury and you correct your perjury before the other side challenges, it's not perjury. So they had the DPS and see who knows that but attorneys and somebody like me. So they had the fingerprint person commit perjury, and then the next question fix their perjury saying, I don't know where they were found. Now, it was up to the state, the defense, to jump up and call them. But they didn't. They sat on their hands like they did everything else.
Hence, what you said earlier with your love for Bryce and the Innocence Project.
Right. Well, this was done by Rodney's original trial attorneys.
Okay.
But everybody who's represented Rodney has never represented Rodney. They've worked for the state. And see, here's the other little nasty little piece of this. While I'm working with 2020, they interview the Attorney General, Lisa Tanner, and they have her on camera. And she says, we have a bomb coming in time of death. We've got a bomb, on time of death. And so the producers called me and said, David, the Attorney General says they have a bomb coming on time of death. I said, that's BS, not true. We have her on tape. She said it. I said, I don't care what she said. It's not true. I did the time of death. There's nobody that can challenge that time of death. And there's not a medical examiner in this state that would do it. Because I remember, I've already removed 10 chief medical examiners in Texas over the last 10 years and have a file on all of them. And there's none of them are going to challenge me because they'll lose. So later, I find that the Innocence Project has gone to the medical examiner who did George Floyd's autopsy. And they had him look at Stacey Stites' autopsy. And he wrote a report. And he does the damnest thing. He suggests that Stacey did not die at 3:30 a.m. That she was kept alive, kidnapped for many hours, and was only killed just before her body was found. Well, hello, that's a bomb on time of death, isn't it? So how is it that Bryce Benjett's bunch just pulled this together, and the Attorney General knew it within weeks, and is telling 2020 they have a bomb coming in time of death?
But even
now,
how do you? Okay, so basically, then that is saying that the body is just going into rigor.
The defense team is working for the state.
So the argument with regards to Stacey here at this point is that she's just now going into rigor when they found her. Right,
that's his scenario, but it's not true.
Gotcha.
And I can prove it and slap it down. It's not that, they would never be able to make this stand. But what it showed me is how tied the Attorney General's office, the prosecutors are into the Innocence Project. That they knew this. And see, the Innocence Project was trying to push 2020 to do their story with this medical examiner in the George Floyd case. And when I looked at that George Floyd autopsy, I told him not only hell no, but hell no. I'm going to tell you, the public out there, if you think that guy Chauvin is going to get convicted for killing George Floyd, you are sadly mistaken, and you're in for a big surprise. Because I have that autopsy report, and I'm going to tell you right now, Chauvin didn't kill George Floyd. It's the officer you can't see kneeling in his back that completely collapsed his lungs. I mean, they are collapsed.
Well, remember, we spoke about that in detail.
Right. And so, but here you have the Innocence Project wanting this guy who would cover up George Floyd's death to be the new medical examiner for the Innocence Project in Rodney Reed and Stacey. Rodney he might as well put a gun to his head.
Right.
That guy would kill him. And so I told him, hell no, you're not going to do that with this guy. I won't cooperate. I'll shut down. And so they did. We found a new medical examiner. And you see, this is the stuff that makes me crazy about this Bryce, about Bryce and Barry Scheck. I mean, do they know what the hell's going on? Or are they actively participants in this framing Rodney Reed and trying to get him executed? Because I'm going to tell you, every day goes by, I get more concerned for who's representing Rodney. Yeah. Because it sure doesn't look like anybody, and definitely not Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project.
You see?
Now, just to digress just a little bit, Barry Scheck got Michael Morton, who was in jail for 26 years for the murder of his wife, back from '86. Same medical examiners as Rodney Reed, Bayardo. But here's something else. Both autopsies have a very odd phrase in them, and talking about the vaginal area of both victims. The former Travis County medical examiner writes that they are Paris women, P-A-R-O-U-S. I've never seen this used, and I have hundreds of autopsies. And I've never seen Bayardo use it except in these two cases. In the case of Stacey Stites, I'm going to tell you this right now. In 2008, I had a conversation with Stacey's mother, Carol Stites. She admitted to me over the phone that Stacey was pregnant at the time of her death, and that the fetus was Rodney's. They knew it. Stacey knew it. Her mother knew it. Her mother wanted her to have an abortion because if she delivered a biracial baby to Jimmy Finnell, he'd have killed all three of them. But Stacey refused. That's what got Stacey killed. When Stacey got pregnant, she assumed it was Jimmy's.
Carol Stites said on the oath that she didn't know of Stacey knowing Rodney.
That's right. And I asked Carol, I said, what the hell? You've known that it was Rodney's kid and she was pregnant? And so you know he's innocent? And that Jimmy killed Stacey? Why haven't you come forward? Why haven't you told anybody? She says, will it bring my daughter back? I said, Carol, nothing can bring Stacey back, but you can keep an innocent man from being killed and make sure the one who killed your daughter pays. Nothing. No comment, no nothing. So I doubled down on it. A couple of weeks later, they had oral arguments at the Court of Criminal Appeals in Rodney's case. Stacey's sister, Crystal Dobbs, showed up with her husband and I think her husband's brother. Immediately after the hearings were over, they were holding an impromptu press conference out in front of the Court of Criminal Appeals. All the cameras, the local TV station, Fox, CBS, NBC, ABC, and Time Warner were all filming this little press conference. I worked my way to the front and I said, Crystal, isn't it true that Stacey was pregnant at the time of her death and the fetus was Rodney's because that's what your mother just told me 2 weeks ago? And she was trying to get Stacey to have an abortion, but she refused. Crystal Dobbs froze like a deer in the headlights of a freight train and just stared blank into the cameras and into the people standing there. She went a little weak. Her husband reached around her waist on one side and grabbed her elbow on the other to support her because she went weak-kneed. And still she stands there, blank-faced. And after what seemed like forever, it's probably 20, maybe 30 seconds, she turned and they all ran. Never said a word. Turned and ran. And to this day, not anybody at that Stites families on their Facebooks, on their blogs, have ever said that Stacey was not pregnant. And if you look on that 2020 special, right at the end, they have Stacey's mother saying, "Oh yes, she was so happy. All she wanted to do was get married and have a baby. Not get married and get pregnant, but get married and have a baby, because she was already pregnant." Now, what the hell's going on here? That Paris means, when it says, when Vallarta writes that she was a Paris woman, just like in the Michael Morton case, it means that they were carrying a live fetus at the time of their death. This is a double murder in both cases. To this day, Michael Morton, I have tried with the people who know Michael Morton to get it across to him that that's exactly what Vallarta was saying, because Paris is a word, is an old Latin word that is a determination between whether an animal is an egg layer or bears live young.
Right.
Omniparous and Paris. Paris bears live young. The other is an egg layer. So when they use it in a phrase like this, in an autopsy, it has to be relevant to the death. So he's telling everybody, which is what Carol Stites confirmed, that Stacey was pregnant at the time of her death. Now, you can feel sorry for this family, but let me point something out about this family that the public needs to know when you're judging them. Stacey got pregnant during high school. They made that very clear.
Right.
And her daughter was put up for adoption.
Right.
Do you know that they did not tell the father of that child that she was pregnant? They kidnapped his baby and basically sold it off to a member of their church. Do you know when the father of Stacey's daughter found out about her husband? Her father?
As an adult?
This year.
Oh.
He never knew Stacey was pregnant for 20-something years until she contacted him. This is the stuff that Carol Stites will do. She didn't give, when Stacey couldn't raise her child, the father was older. He was 19, 20. She didn't give him and his family the opportunity to raise his daughter. She adopted it out to her best friend at church. That's little more than a kidnapping. She violated his rights. And they tried to stop Stacey's daughter from contacting her dad. All the way up to this year, they prevented it until this year.
So this goes to show, or it speaks to the whole
fact that they will lie about everything.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yes.
So
they will lie to protect their image. They will lie to obtain the, to adopt out their daughter, her love of her life's child to a family within the church. Now, I had heard this from friends of Stacey's, her girlfriends, that Stacey never got over her mother forcing her to give up the baby. And what added salt to that wound is right after Stacey's daughter is adopted to this family, Carol starts babysitting for members of the church. Yet Carol wouldn't babysit Stacey's daughter so she could raise it, go to school and raise it. But she would babysit for members of the church. And Stacey never got over that. She was still mad about it when she died. And that's why she wasn't giving up that baby when Carol told me that she was trying to get Stacey to have an abortion. Stacey wasn't giving up that baby come hell or high water.
So here we go. One of the things Scott said to me is that, and he also said it in one of the documentaries that he was interviewed. If you find the person that killed Stacey Stites, you'll find the person that killed his brother.
No, it's not going to be true. I looked at that possibility, but I think the person
Or
who
the person's
killed
involved.
Ed was one of three people. It was, this is in my opinion, based on the research.
Mm-hmm.
It was the sheriff at the time, Richard Hernandez,
Mm-hmm.
Rocky Wardlow,
Mm-hmm.
or David Board. One of those three people is the one who killed Ed, not Jimmy Fennell.
Which comes back to the other side of what of it. If it's not the person that killed Stacey, then it's just someone who was involved in.
Oh yeah, This was a cabal. The people who were involved, and based on what I can see, it's all about money. You see,
but where does money come into this? Because Stacey didn't have a whole lot of money.
Look, Wardlow didn't know Jimmy Fennell, or Jimmy Fennell wasn't personable enough to be Rocky Wardlow's best friend.
Okay.
But Jimmy Fennell put Stacey on his insurance policy on his truck.
Mm-hmm.
And best I can tell, it was $1 million policy.
So,
and from what I can also tell from payouts over the years, that he paid $500,000 to those people who helped him cover up his murder.
How you know that?
Based on when his wife divorced him and what kind of settlement she got out of it. And it was such a considerable sum of money. And based on Jimmy Fennell's hiring over time, and this piece. Now, I used to do consulting, so I used to consulting for the Postal Police, and I've seen this. One of my targets did this back in 91, 92. Used their auto insurance policy to finance a matter. And see, you keep seeing Lisa Tanner, the Attorney General, keep saying, Stacey was abducted out of the truck. Stacey was abducted out of the truck. You see, in order for that insurance policy to pay on that $1 million policy, Stacey had to be abducted out of her truck. If she wasn't, that insurance policy doesn't come into play.
Okay, how does that benefit Lisa Tanner? To harp on that point.
Well, Lisa Tanner and her sidekick, Mitzi Wolf, and I understand now that they're, based on what I've heard, is they are married. They're in a same-sex marriage, which is crazy because they're still operating together, and yet they're a husband and a same-sex couple team, which they can't testify against each other. It completely violates all the tenets of law. It's just crazy stuff. But that's Texas. Anyway, Lisa Tanner and Mitzi Wolf, I've watched them forever. They don't have to have a reason, other than say, we want you to convict this person. He's innocent. He's black. Make sure you get him locked up for life or dead. And they'll do it. And be happy to do it. They don't care. These two are like, Texas' version of Joseph Mengele and Stalin. I mean, they're killers. And they have no qualms about it. But in this case, documents surfaced that Carol Stites took Stacey off her insurance policy in March of 96. Now, Texas has, a mandatory insurance policy. Jimmy Fennell is a police officer. Jimmy Fennell is letting Stacey drive his truck to and from Bastrop. You don't think he had insurance on her?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Of course he did. And a standard death policy at that time would be $1 million, as it still is today. Your basic policy, insurance policy, no fault, is going to have $1 million coverage for injuries or death of passengers or people in the vehicle. So Texas has no fault insurance. If Stacey was drug out of that pickup, the no fault insurance policy would pay. It would pay the full limit. Now remember, Rocky Wardlow doesn't have a pot to piss in, $1 to his name. He has to sleep on Ed Salmela's couch. His wife is divorcing him, and about the time of Ed's death, boom, he comes up with money and he can afford his own place and buy property.
Just as seen in the chat here. Justice
Out of
C
that.
is saying, so there was a struggle before he was killed. And didn't someone else get hit from the gunshot in another apartment?
No, the reports that there were 2 shots fired. One went through the wall of an adjacent neighbor, and they said that that night, man, they were over there plugging up the bullet hole in her wall with toothpaste, which is a standard trick.
Who?
And
the police
she
was
moved
plugging
out.
it?
She moved out of the state.
The-
Nobody got hit.
yeah.
It just the bullet went through her wall.
So who was plugging the
But
wall?
there were 2 shots.
Who was plugging the wall?
The law enforcement. Because they had to go to her apartment because she's claiming there's a bullet went through my wall, so they had to go in there and cover it up. And then she promptly moved out. She was a coach at I think the high school, and she moved out, and moved back to another state.
I'd move out too.
I think that would probably be almost anybody's, and especially if you grew up in Bastrop, because this is standard fare in Bastrop. And David Board has the history of tampering with evidence, and he is a racist beyond bar none. Now, while we're on the air, let me give give your listeners a little heads up.
Mm-hmm.
European TV is doing a 30-minute Rodney Reed broadcast. I met with them in March of this year.
Yes.
They're set to air just in a couple of weeks. Now, this is just going to be the little one. They have a bigger one coming. But the little one has an interesting interview. You've heard about the white supremacist guy who was in jail with Jimmy Fennell,
From the
who's done the
Aryan Nation?
affidavit that Jimmy admitted to him that, he had killed Stacey?
Yeah, from the Aryan Nation.
Right.
Yeah.
French TV has the face-on-face interview with the guy.
Oh.
He sat down last March, he sat down in front of a camera and went into some detail, a lot further than that affidavit goes.
All right. So we put up a lot of dots here tonight. What are the dots that point to Ed not committing suicide and it being linked to the Stacey Stites case where Rodney Reed is on death row?
Well, by mere fact that he did not have his gun, that he surrendered the gun, he had been indicted for the very reasons that the federal anti-terrorism law went into effect for, is to take away guns from people who, have been accused of domestic violence or making terroristic threats.
Right.
And Ed did those. That's what he was indicted under. You have a person who saw him surrender the guns, and the next day he's dead from a gun that he didn't have. And that's pretty conclusive that he didn't commit suicide.
Okay.
Now, when I started raising that issue, the sheriff's office told me, and do you know who the sheriff officer was who told me this? Ronnie Duncan. Not Rocky Wardlow, Ronnie Duncan. See, Ronnie Duncan, who was the police chief when Stacey died of Bastrop.
Right, he was the one that was handed the documents. He was the one that was handed the evidence.
Right. He then became, when Sheriff Hernandez was elected sheriff in January 97, he became the chief deputy. When I moved into this county in 2000, 2001, I dealt with Ronnie Duncan. And when I raised that question to him, he said, Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow went to David Board, got Ed's gun, and gave it back to him because he was, felt sorry for him. And I said, and violated federal law? Are you kidding me? Because that's the end of Rocky Wardlow's career as a ranger. And boy, then he backed off on that one real fast. See, Ronnie Duncan knew nothing about the Federal Anti-Terrorism Act until I explained it to him.
Oh, so it's common
They
practice.
were like, oh, maybe I misunderstood. I said, my ass, you were told that to blow smoke up my butt.
So it's common practice for officers to, when fellow officers have to turn in their guns and their badges. Common practice to take evidence out of police custody and give it back.
Now let's back up a little bit. You know, we're talking apples and oranges. If you're just talking about a local police officer who under local order of the of one of the lieutenants took an officer's guns, and then the police chief went and got them and took them out and gave them back to him, that's one thing. But if the guns were taken away under the requirements of federal law, nobody takes those out of evidence and gives them back to the officer, because you're in violation of federal law, and that's a felony federal law. That you give a person accused, of making terroristic threats, and you give them the guns back in violation of federal law, that'll be the end of your career. And you may even be facing jail time, especially if that officer then goes and kills somebody or injures somebody or something else. No officer would ever go and get a gun out of lockup when federal law requires you to take that gun away and give it back.
Or knowingly.
Knowingly or unknowingly. Remember that little old saying, ignorance of the law is not a defense?
Okay. Yeah,
no. And let me tell you, all law enforcement know if a gun's been taken away, you don't give it back to another officer. That is a problem waiting to happen.
Okay. So then I can see, I don't know why he would have come up with that excuse about feeling sorry for him and taking his gun back.
They were blowing smoke up my butt.
Yeah.
They were they thought they could, see, these people, they don't understand. They are continuously warned. If you're going to deal with somebody, that would know every trick in the book, just about, that's me. Don't go try to make up things and sell them to me. It won't work. It has never worked. It didn't work in Houston. It didn't work with the postal police. It didn't work with the DA's office in Houston. It didn't work with any of the medical examiners' offices around the state that I pulled the medical examiner out or shut down. Mm-hmm. It has never worked. So why would it work on something as stupid as that?
David, there's one school of thought that is, you mentioned money being a factor in this whole thing happening, and even with Ed being killed. Well, I don't think you said that. You said how you came to the conclusion that he was killed and not it wasn't suicide, but the why he would have been killed. You mentioned very much earlier in the discussion that he was going out of state, you believe, to turn evidence.
That was in talking to Scott, Ed had reached out to a law enforcement officer through Scott that he needed to talk to, and the officer wasn't available that night, and then before they could put Ed in touch with him, Ed's dead.
Mm.
And see, Ed was reaching out. You see, when I see that Ed was there when Jimmy Fennell dropped off the truck with Stacey's body in it, it didn't surprise me, because I noticed something early on. The ligature mark on Stacey's neck is postmortem, and it's what you'd call a soft hanging. Even though in the 2020 piece you have David Board saying, yeah, he strangled her with a belt with such force that it broke it. My butt. To break that belt, in a ligature strangulation would have decapitated her. To break that belt probably took 600-700 pounds of pressure per square inch to break that belt. That belt wasn't broke, it was cut.
For what?
I mean, there's no stretch marks on that leather that would happen if you do that. I mean, I have pull things. The leather stretches, and since that has
and then snaps,
that belt is dyed, Then, as they did, the
color
coating
would
of the
change.
dye would crack and stretch, and you would see it. The braids would be stretched out thin, and you'd see the leather cracks in between the blue because the belt would have been stretched.
Right.
And the dye, and it would open up those big cracks and joints, and you don't see that. So that belt hasn't been pulled apart; it's been cut. And that means it's been placed. That this was planting evidence. One would Reed plant evidence to aim at him. See, but Jimmy Fennell would definitely have a reason to plant evidence in the section of the belt that's found on the dirt road.
Yeah.
Well, it's an arrow. It's laid out pointing to her body in the trees, in that plum grove. So the guy who's set to find her body drives along, doesn't drive past it and have to make 3 or 4, passes, which would really look bad.
Mm.
If you have this tire track after tire track after tire track, what the hell are you looking for? So they had to make him find it, so they put the beer cans on one side of the street and the belt on the other pointing to the bushes, so he knew exactly where to stop. Now, in that 2020 special, Girls in the Pine, they keep saying that this guy was out picking wildflowers and she's late, and they keep showing pictures of bluebonnets.
Right.
Look at the crime scene videos. Look at the videos of the documentary State versus Reed, and you see the pictures up and down the road with the crime van. I defy you to find one wildflower. Because that was a drought spring. There wasn't enough wildflowers in the whole county of Bastrop to make one little bouquet.
Mm-mm.
It's dead grass and leaves and little green shrubs, that have deep roots, because there was no moisture in that ground. And there hadn't been all since fall. So there were no wildflowers anywhere.
So
the story of him, here you have a guy from the land office, from the governor's land office, who's a state, finds her body right when it's planted.
Oh.
See, here's the other thing that you didn't know. The criminalist at the scene, Karen Blakely, she writes no report on this. It's a letter that I found in the Travis County Medical Examiner's office 6 years after I started looking at this case, in 2007. It's a handwritten note by her, where she discloses that Stacey's panties and blue jeans pants are wet when they find her. Really? It rained in forever. If she's been laying out there all day, how did her friggin' pants get wet? And her underwear? Now, they say, oh, well, when people die, they urinate on themselves. Yeah, well, that would have happened when she died. And Bayardo's saying that happened, 9 to 12 hours earlier. Why would they still be wet? They were wet because she was just placed there, and she came from a bathtub, not from being drowned, Kevin Gannon. There's another explanation for this.
Wait, but even that part of it, and again, this is because Ed's death is so connected to these other cases, or to Stacey's case, because he was the investigating officer. Even if she was drowned, where was Rodney going to get that bathtub?
Right, and yeah, exactly. And his mom, he drowned her in his mom's house with as much, traffic as goes in and out of his mother's house, because her 5 sons are in and out all the time, and her husband and her brother, who has mental issues from being in the military. He's on
PTSD.
disability. I mean, there's no way. See, this is the stupid stuff. Now, as I was trying to say, that yes, Ed was present when Jimmy Fennell dropped off the truck with Stacey's body in it. But based on the evidence I see, and I think we'll see this, as we close in on this and to start bringing out the stuff to force actual defense of Rodney that proves he's innocent, not just the time of death, but the other parts that I have,
Yes.
then you're going to see an about face that Jimmy did not kill Stacey. See, that's what Curtis Davis was planting with CNN when he said that Jimmy Fennell was out drinking with his buddies.
Yeah.
Because here's what they were building on, and this is what I saw in the very beginning in 2001, that the way they have this thing set up is ultimately Jimmy can claim that Stacey committed suicide. And see, that's what that CNN story did. Is that Jimmy wasn't home; he was out drinking with his buddy. So let's fill in the rest of the story as I know they're going to tell it eventually. That when Jimmy got back from baseball practice, he'd had enough of the rumors of Stacey dating Rodney. So he broke off the engagement. Told her it was over. He was going to go out and drink with his buddies, and when he got back, he expected her to be gone. To move downstairs, get all her stuff downstairs with her mom. If she saw him, don't talk at him, don't smile, don't wave, don't do anything.
Mm.
And then at the end of the lease ended that month, he would move out of that, that wing. But the story would be that when he came home, after drinking with his buddies, he found that Stacey had tied the belt to the doorknob and leaned into it and hung herself, which would be a soft hanging. That's why the ligature mark doesn't do damage anything but skin deep. Mm. And because she's pregnant, Jimmy didn't want the family to know, that she killed herself and her child. So they were going to set it up as a homicide that would never be solved. And that's how you would get Ed Salmela's assistant, because he's really, in his mind, he's protecting the family from a greater hurt. But then when he realized that they were angling to go after Rodney, I think that was the last straw.
Got you.
And it may have also been the money issue when he realized that they were doing it for money. But you see, in the trial testimony, Jimmy and Carol were talking about that Jimmy was going to take Stacey the next day after her death to put her on his insurance policy on his truck. Well, people, it doesn't work that way. If I want to put a family member or even a friend on my auto policy, I just call my agent, give them the person's driver's license number, and if I have their driving history, if they need that, and they put them on the policy. They tell me how much it's going to be and add them to the policy. That person doesn't have to come down or do anything, because the only thing the insurance company is interested in is their driving record and their age. And with their driver's license number, the insurance company can pull their driving record.
But this is 1996.
That's right. There were computers in 1996.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, there were. And you just send a runner down to the DPS and pull the driving history.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. Oh,
it's the easiest. You pick up the phone. You're an insurance company. You call in the number. They tell you, and if they couldn't email it to you, there was some old gadget way back in the dinosaur times. I think it's called a fax.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah. So you just the DPA call in the DPS to the insurance company. The DPS fax the driving history of the person. Then the agent then puts together the numbers and calls his client, says, yeah, to put Stacey on your policy, it's going to cost you another $600 a year. It's a done deal. Stacey doesn't have to be present for that. But in that now it was discovered that Mother had taken Stacey off her policy in March. That's when Jimmy put Stacey on his policy. So see, then the pieces come together. What are you hiding? Why don't you want anybody to know? And why are you going way out of your way to put it into the trial transcript that you were going to put her on your insurance policy the day after her death? So the presumption of everybody is, oh, she wasn't on his insurance policy, so there was no insurance money. Oh, wrong.
You know
Texas
what?
has, in 96, Texas has mandatory insurance. And he's a cop. She's driving his truck. What the hell do you think? You know, she's not going to be on his policy?
You know, I wanna do something really quickly.
Well, let me do one thing really quickly first.
Yeah.
Because this is something that just has rubbed me the wrong way since the 2020 special. The family made such a big deal about Stacey being buried in her wedding dress. How she'd worked so hard to pay for that wedding dress.
Right.
Well, guess what? The wedding dress wasn't paid for.
Hmm?
That's right. I talked to the woman who, in 2001, who owned the bridal company. And she said Jimmy Fennell came to her and pleaded with her to allow him to have the dress, to take it out. It was unpaid for. He didn't have the money to pay for it, and so that she could be buried in it, and he would pay off the balance, which he never did. He stole the dress that she was buried in. Stacey was buried in a stolen dress that was never paid for.
That's not even partly cool.
That's not even partly, but it gives you an idea who Jimmy is, and again, who this family is. The family knew that the dress wasn't paid for.
You know.
See, this is the stuff. You feel so sorry for the family, and I felt sorry for the family until I started digging this stuff up. And this group will lie and have a black male executed rather than tell the truth that their sister or their daughter was killed by a cop because she got pregnant by a black man and wouldn't give up the child.
But here's the thing.
And they're happy with that.
The thing with that, though, is that it comes back to why we're talking tonight. All the other things that all the other parts that get implicated. The Bastrop Police Department, the Bastrop Sheriff Department, the Texas Rangers, because it not only does it point to Jimmy Fennell, a law enforcement officer, killing his fiancée, but it also points to other law enforcement officers with whom he is close, killing another police officer, another law enforcement or former law enforcement officer.
Well, see, that's why there's a stay on the execution, because two of the people who came forward,
the
one at the barbecue and the one at the funeral, were both law enforcement officers. They're required by law to disclose this, and they didn't, and that makes it a Brady violation and withholding exculpable evidence. That's why the stay. They were two police officers. But you see, sadly, Curtis Davis just passed away. And because of Bryce's total incompetence or corruption, or both, at that hearing in 2017 when he had Curtis Davis before the judge under oath, didn't ask him, Curtis, why did you take off work that Tuesday night, less than 2 hours into your shift? And isn't it you that took off work in the Bastrop jail in order to drive Jimmy Fennell back to Giddings, leaving the truck and Stacey's dead body in the hands of the Texas Rangers? Isn't it you who did this? But he didn't. And now you can't, unless Curtis Davis left a confession with his wife or somebody. He left it with his wife, it may come out. If he left it with Jimmy Fennell, well, that's never gonna happen. Because Jimmy Fennell never tell the truth. I mean, you have his attorney saying, oh, he found God. Yeah, the black church somewhere. Oh, I didn't mean that the way they sounded. some demonic church somewhere. It's not the church that I worship at.
Yeah.
He hadn't been saved by the God I know because he hadn't changed a bit. He'll still lie and try to get Rodney executed and then claim he found God.
So, in the midst of all of this, Ed's death is tying up loose ends.
Ed's death was to prevent a total hemorrhage of what was going on, because Ed would have talked.
Yeah, he was a loose end.
And if Ed talked, it's over for everybody.
Right.
Especially if he talked to the FBI in another state. I'm not sure that...
But, all right.
It would have made any difference if he talked to the FBI in this state, because I've dealt with those people. And let me tell you, it isn't what you think. I haven't dealt with an honest FBI agent ever.
Oh, it's in the state of Texas.
In the state of Texas. And they have a history. And people warn. And people, within the system warn that you don't trust Texas FBI agents. It's just as bad as the Texas Rangers and the rest.
So, because this is a lot. It's a lot because you and I have spoken on so many occasions off air. So I have a bit more information than everybody else does.
Well, you have to. You're the producer of your show. You have to, So.
Yeah. And we're looking at throughout the state of Texas, not just with this particular case, but it shows heavily in this particular instance. We're talking about corruption from the street cop to the judge.
Well, the truth is, and it took me a while to learn this, I always thought it was the district attorneys who were running the corruption because they would then control the testimony of the police. It's not. It's the judges. It's the judiciary. All the way to the Supreme Court. Judges. And see, right now, I'm drafting a complaint with our Commission on Judicial Conduct against the Chief Judge of the Texas Supreme Court for his political shenanigans in trying to protect Republican county judges who have been charged with criminal offenses. And he's been doing this for the last 2 years, interceding illegally, appointing judges, retired judges, to preside over the cases who legally can't take the case and who don't take the oaths.
Okay.
And they just walk over our Constitution and our statutes as if they don't exist. And it goes on and on and on.
And people would wonder what exactly that has to do with this.
What happened to do with this case?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you what it has to do with this case. The judge who signed the execution order in 2014 and 15 of Rodney
yes,
was a retired judge who had never taken the oath of office in 20 years, which is a mandatory requirement for judges in all states. If you're appointed to a case, but you're not an elected judge, under the appointment you have to take the oath of office. In Texas, under 100 years of rulings, a judge who's appointed to a case who doesn't take the oath is not a judge. They're an impersonator, and all of their acts are void and a nullity. And yet, this last judge, Shaver, did not take the oath. I filed on him in 2015. It was actually that filing on the judge in 2015 that stopped Rodney's execution, not the time of death. And then he tried to do it again last year. And I was watching for him. And as soon as he signed the execution order, he resigned from the bench. Now, I was watching, and I saw his name disappear off the computer printout as a judge eligible, a retired judge eligible to be assigned to a case. And as soon as I saw it, I filed what is called a Rule 12 request. It's basically the Judiciary's Public Records Act.
Yes.
I filed a Rule 12 request with the presiding judge of the region who appoints Shaver for Shaver's resignation/retirement letter, and I got it. And it was a killer because Shaver, right after he signed Rodney Reed's execution order, then turned around and said that he's got to, retire and leave the bench because he's getting old and he's afraid he's going to make a mistake in a major case. So he was setting the stage for if he got caught signing a void execution order that got Rodney executed, he'd say, well, I warned everybody in my resignation letter that I was getting senile and I was afraid I was going to make a mistake, and I did. I signed an execution order, when I didn't have the authority to do it. And got the guy executed. And see, as soon as I got that letter, I gave it to the local TV. The local TV went public with it, and that was the end of that. Now, when a judge resigns, and is removed from the bench, any outstanding orders that haven't been completed, they're void. So get this. Now, you want to see corruption. The same Innocence Project, the same attorney, Bryce Minjet, that represented Rodney Reed last year, also represented another death row inmate by the name of Larry Swearingen.
Yeah.
Larry Swearingen was executed last August with Bryce Minjet being his attorney on a void order by a retired judge who did not take the oath of office.
When you said last August, you mean August 2019?
August 2019. Do you know where that retired judge is right now? He's a new judge appointed to Rodney Reed's case.
You know what? I'm done.
Now, there are literally hundreds of retired judges that could have been assigned to Rodney's case. But it just so happens it's the judge who executed, signed a void order and executed an inmate north of Houston last year. Now, if that's not bad enough, this same judge presided over a justice of the peace's some actions taken against a justice of the peace, which is a county judge here in Bastrop County.
Yeah.
Who was on the bench. So the local judges couldn't preside over a case because they knew the you were personally. So they appointed this same retired judge who acted on her cases, having never taken the oath of office. Last April, her attorneys put Bastrop County on notice that this judge is going to sue the county for $4.25 million because this judge never took the oath of office and was illegally on the bench. He was put on notice, and it didn't make any difference. He was still illegally appointed to that death penalty case, had not taken the oath of office, signed the execution order, and didn't give a damn. And then allows himself to be appointed to Rodney's case, still having not taken the oath, and is waiting to whatever arguments the Innocence Project and Barry Shett put before him.
Yeah.
Next May, he's going to rule against them and sign the execution order again. That's what he's assigned to do. There is no justice in this state. When it comes, the judges run everything. This is an imperial judiciary in Texas. And that's why our everything is so corrupt. The judges run everything.
So, all right. Let's come back to Ed for a moment. We're way past. We're not way past, but we've passed the time that I'd normally end the broadcast. But coming back, and those bits of information are really important in the bigger picture. And it's important that people get this, because when they ask some of the other questions as it relates to Ed's death and to Stacey Stites, they can start putting the puzzle pieces together, because this is a 1,000,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that you really need to put together. Coming back to Ed, what were some of the I know you did some work in trying to get the gunshot residue lab reports.
Right. There is not only the gun residue reports, but recently I sought the crime scene pictures
Yes.
The Ranger report and statement, the statements and notes and investigative reports, they're all missing.
Missing as in
They're all
not
gone.
done or done
They're
and
gone. No,
misplaced?
they're gone. The only thing at the DPS, the only thing is the Ranger report. But if you notice in the Ranger report, there are a lot of exhibits. They're all gone. Nobody can find them. They're not at the JP in Bastrop, who commissioned the Ranger investigation into Ed's death. All their records are gone. The Texas Rangers files are all missing. I went through the county attorney, and they went over to the JP and looked. Everything's gone. Well, it took me a little while to figure out where they were, and so I filed a records request to kind of, push the issue.
Yes.
They're hidden at Lisa Tanner took them over to the Attorney General's office and has been hiding them there.
The Attorney General.
It's illegal. Yes, the Attorney General of the state of Texas. It is illegal as sin what she's doing. But it's not just Ed stuff. She's hiding DNA lab reports in the Reed case that contradict the state. She has been systematically removing and hiding documents over there for 20 years. And see, I documented this back in 2001 when I asked for Carol Stites' statement and another guy's statement that the Rangers took.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ranger organization, the Department of Public Safety in Austin's general counsel, told me that Lisa Tanner had the originals transferred to the AG's office, leaving them with no copies. And they never gave these to the defense before trial. They didn't give them to Bryce, the state habeas attorney, Bill Barbish. They didn't give them to Bryce Benjett until 2017 at that evidentiary hearing. And what do? They bring Carol Stites, put her on the stand to verify what they're going to introduce into evidence as her statement. It has no bait stamp numbers on it. That's the way the Attorney General testified they can prove that they gave a document to the defense, is it has a bait stamp.
Right.
That statement they introduced into evidence in 2017 has no bait stamp. And I requested it in 2001, and the General Counsel of the Department of Public Safety said Lisa Tanner had it transferred to the AG's office, leaving no copies for anybody. That's what she's been doing. Hello, Bryce Benjett and Barry Scheck and that Innocence Project? Knock, knock. Is anybody home? This is, if you have a family member who has a DNA issue and the Innocence Project comes knocking, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, your family member is dead.
That's not even
This
cool.
is either the most corrupt or incompetent. I haven't decided yet. Can't prove which it is. Are these cheap people just totally incompetent, or are they corrupt? Now, I'm hearing, over the last couple of months, I've started hearing some things that have startled me. One is, the Innocence Project is composed of civil attorneys, and they do not understand criminal law. Which is, what the hell are they doing representing Rodney? This is a totally criminal case. And the second thing I've heard is whenever somebody confronts the Innocence Project about why aren't you doing anything on this issue or that issue, they say we're strictly DNA. And I'm going to tell you, if you are approaching Rodney's case on DNA the way you're going, he's dead. There was no DNA in this case. The state manufactured it.
But they found Rodney's DNA on Stacey.
No, they didn't. You see, just recently, I got some new documents from the state that contradicts that. It appears that the DNA they're using as between Rodney and Stacey is actually between Rodney and his girlfriend, who accused him of rape in October '95 because she caught him with another girl, and then she dropped the charges. I learned just here in the last 2 months that the state has never run the DNA of Rodney's girlfriend as his girlfriend. The only reason they would do that is they're using that DNA from that girl as under somebody else's name, and if they ran it under her name, you'd get two different people with the exactly same DNA profile.
So,
And this girlfriend is the only sample the state has between Rodney and a girl, because it's between Rodney and his girlfriend. And they took the garments from her apartment back in 95.
so wait.
And that's
so
the only DNA that they have between Rodney and any woman.
did they, so the three spermatozoa believed to be Rodney's found inside Stacey.
Okay, that now, again, here's the problem. The DPS criminalists said, and Bayardo said they made a slide that showed sperm heads and tails.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, nobody has ever seen those slides.
Mm-hmm.
You know where those slides are?
With Lisa
At
Tanner?
the Attorney General's office, Lisa Tanner's office, where they're illegally there, because the Attorney General has nothing to do with this case. All the Attorney Generals who are working on Rodney's case are working on it as assistant Bastrop County District Attorneys appointed from the AG's office. They have no legal authority to move any record from the county files to the AG's office to hide them from the defense. Are you listening, Barry Scheck?
All right. So with sweeping or with creating the image of Ed Salmela committing suicide, then it takes away from a criminal investigation, which then leads to or ties to the death of Stacey Stites.
Right. The death of Ed stopped Ed from going to the feds and disclosing the scheme and fraud that Jimmy killed his fiancée. He paid for the cooperation of Rocky Wardlow, David Ward, and others based on the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And that the state is picking up, where the money payoffs, ended. And the state is not just perpetrating a fraud on Rodney Reed. Remember, the state of Texas, on all of these rulings, because it's a death penalty case,
Yeah.
all of these cases go to the U.S. Fifth Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So the state is also perpetrating a fraud on the federal courts, the Fifth Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court as well. See, people don't think about that. That if all of this stuff is a fraud, then the state is openly committing a fraud on the federal courts. And that's stuff that will send you to prison.
But that wouldn't be the first time.
No, but it'd be the first time that they ever got caught at it.
Well, not exactly. Well, in Texas, maybe. But over in Arizona, there's a case of Dan Gutierrez, who is the second case, second conviction. That's the word I was looking for. Second conviction in U.S. history to be ruled void.
By the Supreme Court?
Yes.
By the U.S. Supreme Court?
Yes.
Yeah.
Two in history, both of them in Arizona. His is the second.
Right, and see, I can see that, and you see, the only reason that's happened is because Arizona is a smaller state and doesn't have a well cured, criminal fraud set up through the base courts all the way up. You see, this is a fraud by the courts.
Yeah.
And see, I've got 3 FBI investigations going on here that deal with autopsies. The autopsies on the Santa Fe High School, where the student shot up the school a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
All of that, the death certificate, all of that's a fraud. Had a long conversation with the FBI. They had no idea death certificates are federal jurisdiction because death certificates are used by insurance companies to pay death benefits. And those insurance companies are in New York and New Jersey. So an illegal death certificate signed by a fake medical examiner in Texas, is one, wire and mail fraud, because they have to fax, email, or mail the death certificate to another state. It's interstate commerce fraud. It's money laundering. And so until I explained that in the Santa Fe high school shooting, the FBI didn't understand that. As we walked through, they go, "Oh my God, you're right." So all of the death certificates, autopsies on the students that were shot in the Santa Fe high school shooting,
yes,
were all illegal and void. Next, they had the FBI in Lubbock taking that place apart because a Canadian national was named as medical examiner up there, one from Austin who got in trouble down here, who then set up a little child body harvesting business with another Canadian medical examiner in California to steal body parts, launder them and sell them to universities. The FBI is up there doing that right now. And third, the Walmart shooting out in El Paso, where the young man shot 20-something people because he was upset over Mexican nationals illegally being in Texas. Well, here's the irony of that, and Texas does everything big, including ironies. The medical examiner in El Paso who did the autopsies on those 22 people is a Mexican national in the country on a falsified H-1B visa J-1 waiver. And so you have a medical examiner who's a Mexican national illegally in the country on a false visa, does the autopsies, which voids them, signs the death certificates, they go out, and the FBI's interviewed me twice on that case. One extensively after the first one. No. Which is kind of why the case is dragging. They got a problem. They go forward, and there's going to be a problem. Now, there's another problem with that. Anthony Scalia, our judge of, one of the judges of the U.S. Supreme Court that died here in West Texas 4 years ago. Yeah. He didn't get an autopsy because his body was taken to El Paso, and I warned that illegal Mexican medical examiner, if he did a high-profile autopsy, I'd put him in prison. The evidence is Justice Scalia's death was a homicide. And the ranch owner committed multiple criminal acts in preventing an investigation into Scalia's death. Under state law, there had to be an inquest. Right. And the ranch owner wouldn't let the justice of the peace or the county judge on the property to conduct the inquest, which is a criminal offense. It's a jailable offense. Yeah. And then they gave the case to the wrong justice of the peace to sign the death certificate, and Scalia's death certificate to this day is null and void. This is how corrupt Texas is. No. They can pull all this stuff off, and nobody pay attention. And you ask, well, wait a minute, where the hell is the FBI? Well, you need to ask somebody other than me, because I've asked them that more than once.
No, you mentioned, here we go again, medical examiners and autopsies. Let's go to Ed again, because everything that you've said about Texas on a whole is happening here.
We missed that on Ed, didn't we? I think it's time to talk about that autopsy report, huh?
Right.
Here's the deal. Go ahead.
I have up on my screen the where it says Tommy J. Brown, D.O., Deputy Medical Examiner, on his autopsy. Let me go ahead and put that on the screen for everybody to see. So, and I'll move the mouse around it so that people can see it. This right here is where it says Tommy J. Brown, D.O., Deputy Medical Examiner. Right?
Right. A doctor of osteopathy.
Cool.
Tommy J. Brown
I must
is
scroll down.
MS, is a doctor of osteopathy.
That
He puts
signature.
yeah.
I'm
Okay, now you're on the signature page.
looking at that signature right after the opinion. It is my opinion based on the autopsy findings that the decedent, Edward Lee Salmela, but Lee wasn't his middle name. But
Yeah,
Edward
Lee's not his middle name.
Edward Lee Salmela, that's another story. Came to his death as a result of contact gunshot wound to the head through self-inflicted. However, he came to that conclusion. Now, right after that opinion is a signature, the name Tommy J. Brown, D.O., Deputy Medical Examiner.
Yeah, right over the type name of Tommy J. Brown is a signature.
Right.
Except that signature is not Tommy J. Brown's.
No, because on next document, Office of the Medical Examiner of Travis County, the toxicology findings, I see Roberto J. Bayardo, MD, Chief Medical Examiner, and the same signature.
Right. So, and you have the name badge of Tommy J. Brown from 77, or is it 78?
Okay. Let me pull that up.
Showing he has perfect penmanship. Beautiful. I wish I had penmanship like that. Beautiful signature.
Let me go ahead and pull that up.
Yeah. While you're doing that, so the people who don't know, who can't see it, the signature of Roberto Bayardo is hen scratch. It's not legible.
Right. So here, I have the ID up now. Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office is certified as at ID 004, Tommy J. Brown, MD.
Yeah, not a DO, but see, Tommy J. Brown lied to get hired to the San Antonio Medical Examiner's Office, claiming he was an MD. They only wanted an MD in their program. But Dr. Brown is a DO, Doctor of Osteopathy, not a medical doctor. And so they threw him out of the program a year after he started, even though it was a 2-year program.
So,
but
his signature is here, though.
Right. See, so what you have here is, to explain what's going on, the Travis County Medical Examiner Bayardo was in Travis County under false credentials and resume from Harris County. He claimed that he was the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Houston when he applied for the job in 78. Based on that assertion, Travis County hired him. Problem is, Bayardo was never a medical examiner in Harris County or any place else, much less the deputy chief. So since his credentials are fraudulent, when it comes to a high-profile autopsy, Bayardo would perform the autopsy, have the report typed in the name of one of his buddies from Houston, like Tommy J. Brown, and he would have the autopsy typed in Tommy J. Brown's name, and then he would scribble his signature non-legibly over the type name of Brown. Now, in the Travis County archives, there are over 250 autopsies done this way. And if anybody from Austin, you're going to get a surprise. Tommy J. Brown claims he did the Austin Yoga Shop murders. Mm-hmm. Those autopsy reports, just like Ed Salmela's, are not signed by him. The signature over his type name on all 4 of those girls' autopsies is Bayardo's name. Because Tommy J. Brown is from Houston. Constitutionally, Brown could never come to Travis County and do an autopsy. It's illegal. There is no precedent. There is no way under the law for a medical examiner in one jurisdiction to come into another and do an autopsy. And so they never did. But they were willing to cover for Bayardo and let him type autopsy reports in their name. And if this thing came to trial, and if the Houston Chronicle was covering the case, where Bayardo would have to credential himself as a former Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Houston, then for a perjury fee that would be paid by the Travis County DA's office, that medical examiner would come up here and commit perjury. And that's what Tommy J. Brown did in the Yoga Shop two murder trials of Scott and Springsteen. He came up and testified he did the autopsies when he did not and legally could not. Just like he didn't do the autopsy on Ed Salmela. It would be illegal. So again, I say, where are you, Barry Scheck, and your Innocence Project? Do you have a criminal attorney anywhere in your organization that can look at this? Because if the medical examiner's office and the state will do this in the Reed case, what won't they do?
Right.
And if I can explain one little thing, there aren't just 250 autopsies in the Travis County archives that are typed in the name of other medical examiners from Houston. There are over 1,200 autopsies in the archives, typed in multiple medical examiners' names, over nearly 30 years, with two people already executed out of Austin, where the autopsies were allegedly done by a Houston medical examiner that were never signed, and two more on death row. Rodney Reed is one, and the other one is Luis Castro Perez. So this isn't a little deal. This is a monstrous deal. And the Austin American Statesman in 2007 and 8, I opened my files to them. They researched all this, confirmed that Bayardo was doing this, that all of this stuff was so illegal, but they decided that the readers of the Statesman wouldn't be interested since I had forced Bayardo to resign and retire in 2007. So they said, oh, now that he's gone, who would care? Well, people like Rodney Reed, who's still on death row, would care.
Yeah.
Luis Castro Perez, who's on death row, would care, and the family would care. Black Lives Matter would care from all of the in-custody deaths that Bayardo pulled this stuff on, and there are lots of those. But according to our Texas newspapers, y'all, you readers in Black Lives Matter and Democrats and you know, the anti-death penalty group, none of y'all care. And so they're not gonna do the stories and let you know. That's how bad this stuff is. So if any of y'all wonder what I do with my time,
David, what are you getting out
lots
of this?
of research.
What are you getting out of this?
Nothing. I charged the Reed family $1 in 2001 to be a consultant for him and dig this research, and I'm still doing it.
$1.
And I'm going to tell you, Sander Reed, you know, ought to be a Wall Street guru on how to invest money wisely, because that's the best $1 that anybody has ever invested in the history of mankind.
Not $1 an hour, not $1 a minute, not $1 a year, not $1 a month. Just $1.
Just $1.
Bless your heart.
Well, they had no money. I mean, God, have you seen the pictures, you know, of their house? You know, and some of the stuff that they have gone through. Sander Reed inherited a building on the downtown square, right there, right at the junction of the red light. Second building from that square. And the chief judge of the Texas Supreme Court appointed retired judges to hold a dog and pony show trial and take her building away from her.
What?
They denied her in 2006. They appointed a retired judge who came in. Now, I was part of this. I filed a motion to have the Judge Townsley recused, Harold Townsley. He's the judge that presided over Rodney's trial and conviction, original trial, sentenced to death.
Right.
He was involved in trying to take the building away. So I thought, you know, I typed up a motion for his recusal, which surprised the crap out of me, that no sooner than Sandra filed it than he recused himself. And the chief judge of the Civil Supreme Court appoints a retired judge, an ex-Court of Criminal Appeals Supreme Court judge, to preside over her case. no sooner than 2 days than he makes his appearance, the clerk writes to Sandra Reed and tells her that there's going to be a hearing on her case that coming Friday. That was originally the trial date, but the trial had been postponed because of the new judge.
Right.
So, and that she would be required to attend this hearing. So she goes to the hearing. I'd already been working with the NAACP to appoint an attorney to represent her. That attorney asked me to file the motion to recuse Townsley. He filed an entry of appearance for that Friday. The appointed judge refused him his entry of appearance. Sandra Reed had pled for a jury trial. She had paid the jury fee 2 times previously with cash, and they pocketed the money. So I had her pay the jury. When I found out about it, I had her pay it by check, and put in the memo box it was for the jury fee. The judge on that hearing date put her to trial, denied her attorney's entry of appearance, denied her a jury trial, ruled against her for $175,000 to take her property. This is what you saw in the South in the 20s and the 30s. And this was in 2006. Well, as soon as she got to the house, she called me and told me what happened. I said, what? So I quickly tracked down the cell phone of that judge who's driving back to Austin.
Yeah.
And I called him on the cell phone. And I said, Judge Charlie Baird, I understand you just presided over Sandra Reed's trial on the property. Yes, I did. And I did exactly what I was told. I denied her attorney's entry of appearance. I denied her a jury trial. I put it a trial on the hearing date, and I ruled against her for the $175,000. And I said, you did what? And he goes, oh, isn't this so-and-so? I said, no, it is not. My name's Dave Fisher. I'm a consultant for Sandra Reed. And he goes, oh, I probably shouldn't be talking to you. And I go, no, that horse is out of the barn already. You shouldn't have talked to me. That guy made a U-turn, rushed back to Bastrop, and vacated his judgment. And then the chief judge of the Supreme Court then appointed another one who did it again and took her property away from her. 2020 is talking about doing that story this year.
Why bother?
You couldn't get a local. You wouldn't be able to get a local TV station or newspaper or anything to point out how the chief judges of the Supreme Court are using their power of appointing retired judges to take people of color's property away from them, to deny them, a fair judiciary and a jury trial in this 21st century, for all God's sake. So all you people that are moving to Texas, understand. You're moving to a state with no constitution and no statutes other than what a judge at any particular time wants to decide it means on that particular day, because that is exactly what you're walking into. And if you're people of color, you're walking into a hellhole.
You know what? They really do everything bigger in Texas.
I don't want to go overboard on any of this.
They really do.
Facetiously said.
No,
I'm telling you, this is exactly how bad it is.
Dave, there's so much more that we could have actually spoken about with Ed's death.
Well, I think we covered. Ed's death was not a suicide. It was a murder. Simple as that.
Yeah, and you've covered possible reasons for the murder, too. Oh, one thing that talking to you kind of connected some dots on for me is Scott said they took the couch that he died on because it was too gruesome. Another reason they probably took the couch is if it actually became a criminal investigation, Rocky's DNA is on that couch.
DNA is going to be all over that couch. That's right.
So they had to take that coach.
That's right. Because if anybody DNA tested that couch looking for, a potential struggle, it all come back to Rocky Wardlow.
Who happens to be the lead investigator on...
Right, see, and then Rocky Wardlow say, oh, well, no, I didn't kill him. I was Ed's roommate within 2 weeks. And they go, wait a minute. So you're a suspect in this murder because you had the keys. You see, all of a sudden, it's just like, what the hell's going on here?
You see, and
Ed
notice...
didn't have his gun because it was taken away from him, but you had the
he has access to his gun.
Deputy tell me in 2001 that Rocky Wardlow gave Ed's gun back to him because he felt sorry for him.
Yeah, Ed turned in his gun, but Rocky had access to that gun.
Well, David Board did.
Well, yeah, David. Well, he still had access through David Board.
See, that's the deal. David Board is not only does he have the gun, and he's like Johnny on the spot at the shooting, declaring it a suicide immediately. I'm telling you, if the finger points at anybody first, it's David Board. But I'm telling you, if somebody came looking at David Board, that boy would turn over, pee on himself, and squeal like a rat fink. He'd point the finger at everybody that was involved. He would turn state's evidence. I mean, when it comes to having a spine, that's not David Board.
I wonder if he'd talk to me.
He's a racist. He's a manipulator of fact.
Okay, and he won't talk to me.
His nuts in the vice, and he's going to scream.
Yeah, you mentioned he's racist. He won't talk to me.
No, well, if it serves his purpose. You see, what was so funny is in the 2020 piece, a blonde white woman, prefaced the setup for the interview.
Right.
And dealt with David, Board all the time. And he was all excited. And then when it came for doing the interview, a black producer showed up. And David Board, just was flabbergasted. And he didn't want to do the interview. But he brought two of his boyfriend boy toys with him to show them how he's going to do this big interview on 2020.
You said boyfriend boy toys?
He had to say, huh?
You said boyfriend boy toys?
That's what I said.
Okay.
One was his masseuse. Yeah, David Board is openly gay.
Okay.
And so he brought his, young boyfriends to show them how he's doing this big interview on the Reed case with 2020. And he had to save face. He couldn't walk out. So he did the interview. But I'm understanding there's a whole lot more than what they did in that little pieces that they did.
Yeah, because I spoke to Joy, and she's like, yeah, they told me they weren't running my part.
Yeah, they wouldn't run her part because she did the interview with you.
That's probably why, too.
I know it is. We had that conversation. We had some words over this. Because the producer's telling me, oh, well, Joy, she changed her story between what she told me and what she told them. And I said, wait a minute, lady. This girl was 16 years old. This is 30 years ago, almost. She had never talked to anybody before she did the interview with you. And I know your interviews. And everybody I know that this producer interviewed, when she left, they hated her. They thought she was incompetent, disorganized. I mean, I'm 201, including me. I almost walked out on her several times on those days in front of a camera. And she tried to get me to say stuff on the air. I told her not only no, but hell no. I'd walk out before I'd say that on air, what they wanted me to say. I don't do that kind of stuff. And then, so So with Joy and what she talked about on your program, there was a little shaving, but again, she's just reliving all this stuff, and yeah, I expect it to change. You see, 2020 should have given her at least 2 months from when they first talked to her before they put her on camera, and talked to her and got stuff and script in order for her to relive and think about, and because you pull up something from 30 years ago when you're young, and one day to another you remember, oh crap, that's not right. This is what really happened. That happened later.
Right. The sequence might be off a little bit.
But the real deal was because she broke the story on your station, and they were going to use it as this big Shazam. But you see what they did do in their piece is they talked about, you know, the 12-year-old Hamby being raped, and they didn't use any of the documents that Hamby's own handwritten report said it was James Slaughter who raped her.
Yes.
And then it wasn't the first time. And then you have James Slaughter's statement to David Board saying, yeah, I had sex with her. He's 19, she's 12.
Right.
He's 6'2" and 225 pounds and a muscular, you know, premier athlete, and he bites the holy crap out of her face, both sides. Have the pictures. And he's not prosecuted. Now, when David Board goes to trial...
And he used a horrible Jamaican accent while he was doing it. Oh, yeah, yes. And see, I never knew what that was until I talked to you, and I thought, it could have been Kevin. Yeah, thanks.
So in the trial transcript, they got David Board on the stand, and Lisa Tanner's asking him, and she says, you know, now, he says, she asked him about, was she raped before? He says, yeah, 2 weeks earlier. And we had enough information to go to the grand jury and get an indictment, but he decided not to do it. Well, that was James Slaughter, too.
Yeah.
See, James Slaughter raped her. It wasn't violent. Her family found out about it, took her to the police station to file charges. James Slaughter got mad, told Joy that he was gonna rape her again for going to the police, and this time it was violent because he was making a point.
Right.
And in the statement I have of David Board from way back then is that in '89 is that you know, James Slaughter, yeah, he's had sex with her before. Statutory rape. I mean, he's 19. She's 12. And now let's go and look at Lydia Clay Jack saying, oh, Rodney knew better. You know, dating white women back then, you know, what do you expect happened? Oh, well, wait a minute. Having a black male, 19, 6'2", 225 pounds, football player, raping a 12-year-old white girl in '89, you know, what is that, 6 years earlier?
Yeah.
And he walks because he's a football player.
And his DNA was in the police officers. They
had his DNA, so they made all of the. So what did they do? Tell everybody, oh, well, we lost the rape kit and all this other stuff.
Yeah. Only
they
for
made
it to be found in a locked refrigerator.
Huh?
Only for it to turn up in a locked refrigerator.
Well, wait a minute. Before you talking about them having the DNA, oh, I think they disposed of it. You know, got rid of it because the judge and the powers to be told them they're not going to prosecute this guy. He's already got the scholarships. Because when they were supposed to have sent her DNA to the defense lab in California, they didn't ship it. Even though Tanner swore to the judge, he ordered it. She swore to him it was already done, and it never got done. The defense never tested it, which tells me they never had it.
Listen, I've gone over an extra hour now, Dave. You know how it goes when you and I get to sitting down and talking. I hope this sheds some light on this whole Ed Salmela case for many of you who have heard his name mentioned, especially in the 2020 report, and you've heard them talk about suicide. These are the reasons why there are some out there that say that doesn't fly, and or as Donnie Walker would say, that dog don't hunt. It's a Texas thing, isn't it?
It's a Texas thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think he learned that phrase when he moved to Texas. So that
I think he probably heard it fall out of somebody you know's mouth
yeah,
more than once.
some David Fisher do
Yeah.
it.
Yep. That would be one of my old colloquials.
Right.
But here's the deal: is all you have to do is look at what Rocky, the Texas Ranger, did after Ed's death, and he rewrites the evidence that Ed collected at the high school parking lot.
Right.
That tells you that Ed's death was tied to that first day of investigations of the truck at the parking lot. That they needed to change that, and Ed wouldn't change it. So after his death, they changed it. And what they did is they hid those clothes. Those clothes were all of Stacey's clothes from her apartment that he used to put in the trash bags to cover her body on the floorboard of the truck when he drove it to Bastrop. So if he got pulled over, it looked like he was doing laundry. This is why and of course, then you can start, connecting the dots. The reason the Texas Ranger didn't search Ed's apartment was because all of Stacey's things were thrown out in the truck. And there'd be nothing in her apartment that belonged to Stacey. Now, if Ed told him, oh, well, she keeps all of her clothes downstairs, they'd have gone downstairs, talk to Stacey's mom, and she's saying, no, they're not. They're up in their apartment. If they're not there, what's going on? See, that's why. And it tells you Wardlow knew all of this from day one, which is why he didn't search the apartment, because he knew the clothes that they had from the dumpster were Stacey's.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start putting it together, what you see the Ranger do, he handled the investigation when he was a suspect in Ed's death, declared it a suicide when Ed didn't have his gun. David Board and Rocky Wardlow, the Ranger, they were like the Siamese twins through this whole case. David Board was standing at Rocky's side every step of the way, yet David Board is with the Bastrop Police Department, and once Stacey's body's found out in the country, has no more involvement in it.
Right.
But you see these two working hand in hand because both of them have no scruples. They'll lie, cheat, steal, and kill to cover their butts. And so
they probably did get involved for money.
Right. And definitely with Wardlow, because as I said, he was being divorced by his wife, needed money, didn't have enough money to even rent his own apartment, had to sleep on Ed's couch. And yet, suddenly he ends up with a lot of money about the time of Ed's death. And gets his own place.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are too many inconsistencies that Ed's death keeps coming back to these two people.
Right.
The one with Ed's gun and the one who declared his death a suicide. And how those two are the ones that turn on Rodney. You got David Board, produces all the DNA evidence on all these extraneous rape cases that are bogus, and Ranger Wardlow is the one that's running his investigation on the death of Stacey. Even though all the evidence collected that first day implicates only one person, and that's Jimmy Fennell. So you see, all of this is tied up between these two people, Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow and David Board.
Right.
And then you mix in the corrupt Attorney General who has no qualms with lie, cheat, steal to win. And you've got a black defendant hasn't got a prayer.
Mm.
And then you throw in the Innocence Project. Big name, no action.
Mm.
See, when I brought this to the attention of the newspaper, that Stacey's been dead almost 24 hours when her body was found. Now, this is all provable. It's dated in the article August 23rd, 2001. And then I say it again in the State versus Reed documentary that she couldn't have driven herself to Bastrop. Because of the bodily fluids in the floorboard of the truck, she had to have died in Giddings. That was given in 2001. It was on the State versus Reed documentary all over the national and the PBS airways in 2006. And Bryce saw this, and still nothing. And then A&E TV in 2014-15, I give it to them, and then I tell them to shove it up Bryce's butt. And then Shazam, suddenly Bryce has discovered time of death. Had he listened to me in 2001, Rodney would have only been in jail maybe 5 years tops, instead of 22 going on to 23. And still no light at the end of the tunnel yet. So no, I'm not going to be easy on Barry Scheck. I'm going to continue to call it like I see it and continue to raise the issues until somebody over there, gets their head screwed on right.
Yeah.
Because I am a paid consultant for Reed. I owe him a fiduciary. And if I have to take Barry Scheck to task, because Barry Scheck needs to wake up and get a hold of that organization, or shut it down. Because it sure isn't helping anybody. Anyway,
Dave,
Kevin, I think even all of our listeners are falling asleep.
I it's probably information overload and they're trying to absorb it all. Of course, we're going to be talking again. There are some other issues that we actually need to touch on too, but we will be talking again.
Yeah, we weren't thoroughly prepared, so we went a little far afield.
Well, we were overly prepared.
Yeah, we'll need to set parameters and barbed wire fence boundaries on the next one. That way we keep it right on topic.
Yeah. But I thank you. I thank you for the information.
And I appreciate the time.
Yeah, man. Not a problem. That's what I'm here for. But thank you for your dedication. Thank you for keeping it to the facts. Yeah, we toss in some opinions in there, but we're looking at actual documents.
Right, and we need to, and that's something we need to do in the near future, is that Dallas case you brought me with the autopsy.
Well, if they want to proceed with it going public,
right, we need to do that summary report this week so that you can give it to the family and let them decide what they want to do.
Right.
But that's another man of color who died at the hands of the police.
Right.
And they tampered with the reports.
Yeah, we've seen how documents get changed. I was just showing on the screen Ed's report of the findings at the school, and
what Rodney Wardlow changed them into.
Yes, which included the carbon copies. So people that are watching this broadcast in a rebroadcast, you'll see that information.
Right, and see, that's always good. When a lot of podcasts, it's just people giving opinions.
Right.
You have somebody read the transcript and they give you opinion. Oh, yeah, he did it. I read the transcripts and it's clear that he did it. Even Rodney's attorney on the 2020 piece. Yeah. Jimmy Brown.
Yeah.
We were talking, before the broadcast, and he says, David, I've read, the briefs and the transcripts, and he says they're well put together. I mean, it really looks like Rodney did it. And I go, yeah, but that's because you've read the brief and the transcripts.
Right.
Look at the documents, and you get a very different picture. And of course, why did the transcripts and briefs read that way? It's because Bryce never represented Rodney. He's never raised any issue. In fact, Bryce was behind the scenes undoing Rodney's case. And I know I watched him do it for 13 years and just got madder and madder and madder. And now I'm pretty PO'd.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, would I go after Bryce's law license? Hell yeah. I'll do everything in the world I can to have his ass his butt disbarred. Pardon my French.
Mm-hmm.
That guy, I mean, if you really saw and knew what was going on, there's not a person that wouldn't be appalled. But you're not seeing anything from Barry Scheck other than to protect Bryce Benjett's reputation, which Bryce Benjett has no reputation. He's as bad as Lisa Tanner and Mitzi Wolf. And Rodney has spent, since 2002 to now, 18 years in prison because of Bryce Benjett.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyway, we'll keep on going if we don't just flat end it, go cold turkey.
All right, bro.
So you have a good night, and we'll talk again.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Take it easy. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Take
You
care.
Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. I gotta get out of here, get some rest, take on a new day coming up. But there you have it. If you have questions, go ahead, send them. You know how to reach me. You can comment on and send me an email. Go to the website and send me an email. Those of you who listening to the rebroadcast from the audio archives or even watching the video in the video archive, you can reach me through where the video is on the archive, or you can just email me directly from the website kevinstew.com. Reach out to me. Send me your questions. Let's talk. I can get David involved. Not a problem. And I'll go ahead and share some of this information via social media. I just need to verify. Yeah, I should be able to share this. I do believe David told me I could. So I'm going to share some of this information on social media. You look at it yourself. These are actual documents. And then, let's talk some more. But until then, understand this. Like Jadan said, it's all about the truth.
Speak the truth. Hey, no one forever. I look at
Until tomorrow, well, later today,
truth. Don't need no
when we have Healthy Love.
hints, no way.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you wherever you are in the world from right here in South Florida.
I lie you
Good night.
the truth. No call for no argument, no way. So why you want to defend yourself when you know say I lie you want to tell a lie till you confuse yourself. Run down money and you don't got no help. Put your heart where you can't reach it. You ready? I see people things. Tell me why you want if it have a ulterior motive and it's no secret. Me come here so fi speak it to everyone. Me come fi reveal it. No more, me now hold no secret. Tell us the truth. Don't need no defense, no way. Why you want defend yourself when you know say a lie you want to?
Greetings and salutations, one and all. You're invited to tune in to the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. It airs on Mondays with Community and Finance, Tuesdays with Healthy Love, and Wednesdays with Real Talk from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Come spend some time interacting in the stew pot where we keep things bubbling and wind down in musical therapy. The night shift with DJ Kevin Stew is on kevinstew.com, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment.